Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, my business partner, my man with the master plan, my man with the good ideas. Surprisingly, it hurts me to say that almost. I'm going to say it anyway. My man with the good ideas, Mr. Jason Johnston. Some people will say John Stone. Yellen.
Good grief. How does 2023 get better than the man with good ideas? You have set your ship a sail this year, Joshua. That is now a quotable.
Well, you came to me, I don't know. When was it? November, December? I don't know what it is, but you came to me and you said, you know, people have been asking us for nearly 7 years now.
All right.
Could you do something on YouTube? Can you move this over to YouTube? And we thought, I remember having a conversation thinking, it seems counterintuitive to have a podcast on YouTube. Like, aren't podcasts audio only? And we fought it. And then you sold it to me, Jason. You sold it to me hard.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. You and I are official old men. And we try to do things like young men, but really we move back into the world of the old men. And my kids, not that my suggestion was we sell whiskey to kids. That would be very wrong for anybody in officialdom who's listening to this. We would be very against that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. However, we also say hashtag please drink the whole bottle responsibly. So I feel like we are responsible entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. But I see how much my kids love the YouTubes, and I know how much of an entertainment portal it is for them and people older than them who do drink, but who are maybe not our age, which is becoming advanced. And so I started thinking about...
We're still in our 40s, Jason. I mean, we're getting old, but we are still in our 40s.
Dude, you're going to spend every day of 2023 saying
Goddamn
this.
Right. Damn right.
You're going down in a blaze of glory.
I got 11 months left. Just give it to me. Just placate me, Jason.
You're under 11 months, my friend.
Jason, I said placate
me.
You're
under 11 months.
You meant to placate me.
I've got a whopping 18 more months in my 40s. It's just going to keep going and going. Here, just while we're on this, you'll like this.
All right.
This connects to me talking about my kids as well. My 15-year-old
All right.
is now taller than me. And you will be very pleased to know that he pulls all the shit with me that I have spent the duration of our friendship pulling with you.
You know what we call that? We call that comeuppance. We call that comeuppance, Jason.
And it's so funny, right? He's only 6'3", right? Like
only 6'3".
He's only 6'3" at 15. Him pulling this shit, I'm like, dude, your uncle, you know, his uncle Moo, my brother Murray, has been 6'6" since he was 17 years old, right? I've had almost, he won't thank me for saying that. Let me think how the math works on this. I have had over 20 years, I think it's over 25 years, of Uncle Moo being 6'6", right? To my mere 6'2". So I'm used to having somebody taller than me, right?
Yeah.
You know, Greg Swartz is taller than me, right? Like it happens. I'm okay with it. But the fact that, it's such an achievement for him to be the height that he is. And if he gets another half inch or inch before his younger brother's bar mitzvah in June, he's going to be even more insufferable. I'm not even going to say insufferable, more insufferable than he is right now.
So, all right. So I guess I need to wear platform shoes when I come down for the bar mitzvah.
I think at that point you're talking stilts.
So listen, hold on. We're getting a bit off track. I wanted to get back to the compliment of you and your idea to bring Extra Extra, our bi-weekly podcast, to the land of YouTube.
But tell me you're not incredibly happy that I'm getting my comeuppance.
I kind of want to break that out on special occasions. Like that, I do love it, but I'm gonna pepper that where and when needed at very strategic times in your life where it's gonna hurt you the most.
Okay, that's fair. That's perfectly fair. Perfectly fair. I have made fun of your Hobbit height for a dozen years, and it's only
5'10" and 3/4. 5'10" and 3/4. 5'10" and 1/4, actually. I've shrunk in my what you call old age. I'm not even 50 yet, Jason.
All right, so store away the comeuppance. You can enjoy that. Absolutely enjoy that. But back to me having a good idea. Yes. But you were instantly on
Enough
board.
about me talking about me. Why don't you talk about me? So sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, exactly that, right? It's always about community with us. Always.
That is true.
And pre-pandemic, we'd started to talk about getting the podcast out and about, but it was One Nation Under Whiskey podcast getting out and about, which will remain in the podcast world. There's the podcast you're currently listening to will remain a podcast in perpetuity.
Good clarification.
Until I have another good idea. We blow it all up.
All right.
Right, we talked about going out and seeing the nation and having podcasts out in the wild, and we've done it a few times, and we've done it in Chicago, we've done it with Drammers, we've done it with Gene at Warehouse Liquors, we did it in New York with Drammers. I'm working
Westland,
on an incomplete
right?
Joshua Hatton list right now.
Westland.
The one that kicked it all off.
That was the first one.
That was a
Did you mention the
terrific
Jubilee
event.
with the swimmers? With the
No,
Great
right,
Isle of
'cause it was-
Swimmers? Yeah.
Because I was working on an incomplete Joshua Hatton list. Realized I was treading ground I did not want to be treading. So we've done it, right? We would like to get out, do it a bit more as the world continues to be the world that we currently find ourselves in. But extra going to the YouTubes would give us the opportunity to maybe do some live extras. Maybe, invite in the community, take questions in the moment. It seemed like it presented opportunities as also, and we should maybe say this for the last time because, gosh, I feel like I've said this 1,000 times now. It also gave us a chance to add on to it as well and add in this element of new whiskey, fresh whiskey, you and I tasting and talking about whiskey. That seemed like an element we could add in as well. And I think that got us off to a great start in the first episode that dropped on January 18. Getting to dip a toe back into the Whiskey Advocate Top 20. We will dip another toe into that on February 1 when the next extra drops on YouTube. But yeah, like even you were texting me like, Jason, you should see the comments that are happening under this.
Yeah.
Like that's an exciting thing. I really love that. And to end where I began, to be hearing from this community, people that have listened to One Nation Under Whiskey as we stand at the dawn of season 7, those who had listened to Extra through the first 3 seasons and hopefully will continue to listen into season 4 over on YouTube. And then also you and I working to make our YouTube channel a little stickier, right? Add other things. You and I have bandied back and forth some other ideas to put out there. If the community has said, hey, we'd love to see you on the YouTube, we have a duty to go there and entertain.
I love your focus on community because receiving all of those comments on the day that this launched, I responded to everyone, so I've got to do a little math here. It looks like there was 16 or 17 different comments, right? That's the community communicating
Lovely.
with us and going
lovely.
back and forth. And yeah, for the most part, it's been complimentary. as you know, Jason, I gave you a tongue lashing about your audio on that video.
You did.
But we're going to fix that.
I am but an old man. You know,
You are
I
old,
actually teletyped my entire contribution, but you didn't want me to send that over, so via fax.
Oh, I thought you were sending Teletubbies. See?
There's an Edrington joke to be made, but we would never make it. Never make it.
Never make that one. But yeah, so it's you know, the podcast has always been and will continue, and by will continue I mean One Nation Under Whiskey, but the podcast has always been such a great way to get ourselves out there. And the only times we've had communication back was either through reviews on Apple Podcasts. Sometimes people would say things on Facebook. But here we have this instant interaction with the community, with our listeners, and it's just a handful. Like, I think about the number of downloads or streams we get in our podcast far outweighs what we're seeing with YouTube, and that's just because we're in the building stage. So if you're listening to this now and you haven't heard already, Extra, It's All About Whiskey has moved to YouTube. So you can just go to YouTube, look for the Single Cask Nation channel, and that's where you're going to start finding the Extra episodes. Please, as the kids say, smash that subscribe button.
I keep asking you to stop saying that. Like, yes, it's imperative that people subscribe. Please stop smash the subscription button.
Well, that's what the kids say. What are the old? No, they're not. Is that no longer on fleek? That saying?
Oh, God. My skin is crawling right now.
Is that saying no longer off the Chizane?
At what point are you unable to even embarrass yourself because you're just making
It's off the hizzock, right?
Sounds.
Come on, right?
What the old men say are, please subscribe. We'd love to add you to the community.
Oh, I like that. There's a sincere element to that as well. So
see?
Yeah, no, you're
smash the fucking button. It's just creepy. God almighty.
So listen, I want to, later on in the episode, I want us to talk about, we've got some emails that came in, and we have some of this communication on YouTube. I just want to highlight some of it. But
are we still requesting emails for the mailbag episode?
Yeah, so this is perfect. So as everybody knows, each year we end our season with a mailbag episode. Now, Season 6 is going to be different from Seasons 1 through 5 in that we are going to be with our dear Jess Lomas and the wonderful Elijah Ammon,
Indeed.
celebrating Elijah's, hold on to your seats, 30th birthday, speaking of Oldmans.
He only has a matter of days left to say he's still in his 20s.
Oh, my gosh. Screw that guy. Anyway, so it's going to be different in that, you know, you could still send us questions. Please ask us any industry questions that you have, that you want to ask. But also, if you have questions that are specific to Jess or Elijah, if you want us to ask them questions, if you want them to ask us questions, whatever the case may be, questions at One Nation Under Whiskey, no E in whiskey, info@singlecasknation.com. You can definitely get in touch with us that way, and please send us any and all questions you may have. Am I going too far in saying that this is almost like a spousal takeover a la our Thanksgiving episodes?
Yeah, it's not entirely a takeover, but it's more of a group chat.
Fair enough.
Which, of course, we ended up having with the two of us and our two wives. It was a group chat. It was definitely us appearing on their podcast, though.
Yeah. Elijah nor Jess are our spouses, so I guess there's that difference as well. Hello? Is this thing on?
I just had to start laughing because the listener could not see me very quietly nodding my head. Imagining how Elijah and Jess feel to hear that sentence come out your mouth.
So, Jason, now that we got a bit, go ahead.
I I was waiting on permission to do the transition because I have a real cracker up my sleeve.
Are you talking saltines? Are you talking the little chicken baskets? Like, what kind of crackers do we have?
Oh, gosh. Cheez-Its.
Ooh,
Gosh,
Cheez-Its.
Those are addicting.
They're so good. Yeah.
So salty.
The extra
Boy, do they
roasted
make you
ones.
drink.
The extra roasted ones are great.
Let me transition because previously I talked about community. We talked about YouTube. We talked about the podcast.
Checks out.
Talk about the nation. Today's interview is with somebody who we met through our Padcost community. We received a missive from Colin of the Plural Mairs in New Zealand town.
Yeah.
Down there.
Yeah, down there. Officially down there, near Hoppeton.
You would know. And so...
You mother... Drinking more whiskey.
And Colin wrote in multiple times and talked New Zealand whiskey and talked about the value of getting down there and the value of seeing things with their own two eyes. And it sparked internal fights because Jess Lomas wants to be the one going down there. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, that's what the kids say, right? It's a whole thing. It's a whole mood, I think the kids say.
Did I say mood? Is that
So-
like high-key, low-key? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, not the Marvel universe, the Peter Jackson universe. So yeah, we've had this correspondence with Colin of the Plural Mairs. He is now employed by Waiheke, the distillery down there. And boy, oh boy, did we have a fantastic chit-chat
Yeah.
with him and Mark down there. It was
absolutely brilliant.
a real cracker, and it's one of those fun ones where you and I, sitting in the northern hemisphere, seeing slate grey skies and colder temperatures, we had the opportunity to dip into spring, burgeoning summer.
Isn't that amazing?
Absolutely fantastic. They were getting excited about their upcoming season, making moves, opening doors, outside dining. I was more than a little envious, but they were good company.
Am I right in saying that they officially live in the Upside Down?
That sounds like a reference from a Netflix show that I don't watch.
Well, I'm glad that you got that it's from a Netflix show. It's from Stranger Things. Jason.
But here's the thing. I'm always cautious of agreeing with you because it often has implications. And so if I agree with you that they are officially in the upside down world, does that mean they're evil?
It
Does that
totally
mean
means they're evil.
haunted?
And they're
Right?
not. They're not evil. They're not
Right?
haunted. They're just, up is down, left is right. I mean, here we are in winter and there's spring going on summer. It's so interesting to see them entering summer while we're battening down the hatches and getting ready for the chillier weather. That's all.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I do literally think about those in the Antipodes walking around upside down and building houses upside down. Like, I understand how gravity works.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Gravity is vital.
Yeah.
Allows us to do a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
But I've never been in the southern hemisphere.
No, I mean, your body has to get used to it because it's
don't-
gravity in reverse. Yeah.
I don't trust it.
Yeah, I don't
It
trust
sounds
it
like
either.
a newfangled thing.
It
I
is.
think I would fall off the earth if I flew to the down there.
Yeah, which edge do you fall off of?
Listen, we're not having a flat earth conversation. I'm just saying if you have to stand literally upside down, that seems problematic.
Okay, let's be clear of two things. A, people in the southern hemisphere do not build things or stand or walk or run upside down. It's called centrifugal
do.
force. No, they don't, Jason.
They are upside down.
Oh my gosh, Jason.
Look at how the globe works. There's a globe. We're here. They're there.
It's centrifugal force. It's like a bucket of water. Just keep spinning it around. and it
Centrifugal
stays.
force would sling them out the way.
Anyway, let's hand it over to our friends
Joshua has wandered into a part of physics, but he missed that day at school.
I don't know how to irrationalize myself out of this conversation.
Let's go listen to what we actually did talk about.
There you go. Now to Colin, to Mark, to you, to me. We are very lucky in that we've got not just a distillery guest to the podcast, but 2 distillery guests to the podcast, and one of them has been a listener of the podcast for some years. We've got Mark Izzard and Colin, the Pluralized Mairs. Everybody, you heard it here first. The Pluralized Mair is here from, and this is my specialty. My specialty is pronouncing Australian and New Zealand words, and then you get to tell me how wrong I did it. Waiheke whiskey?
Close. So
I like them both staring at you. It was such a distinct pause.
Well,
like,
funny,
do you want to tell them? No, do you?
Funny you should start with that, and good actually that you should start with that, because there are 2 accepted pronunciations. So actually, properly, the Maori, it's of course a Maori word, the Maori pronunciation is Waiheke, but
Waiheke.
9 times out of 10 you'll hear people say Waiheke, and so
Which is what I said. Okay.
kind of. You said something else.
Did I?
Say it again.
I don't even know.
Say it again.
Waiheke. No, I said Waiheke. I said Waiheke.
We'll listen back. But yeah, Waiheke
right.
or Waiheke. It's a bit like Cadenhead.
Oh, there you go. Cadenheads. It really is a joy having you guys on here. And it's interesting, when we first heard about you, it was actually through Nick Ravenhall of Holyrood, because I know he came to visit the distillery, and he says, there's this guy, Mark, on this island, and he's doing this crazy thing with weird stills and crazy whiskey. And I'm like, okay, all right. And I did a little research, which is something we don't often do on this podcast, but I did a little research. And I went to your website and saw that your stills, or at least one of them, I think it's your spirit still, is in fact kind of crazy to look at. It's got sort of an unusual pop to it. And so I'm painting this picture of craziness and weirdness, and I want to know, Mark, how much of that is warranted?
I don't think we're that weird. I need to look at. I think some of it's warranted because we've kind of grown up in a little bit of a vacuum, and deliberately so in lots of ways, because we didn't want to become a facsimile of Scotland or Ireland or Japan or anywhere else. So we've kind of been a bit homegrown in that Kiwi tradition of doing it yourself and making it yourself. The fundamentals are the same 3 ingredients and the same double distillation, same copper pot stills, but we just approached it from there's 2 reasons why our stills ended up that way. One was we built them ourselves, and so when you're making something yourself and you're not necessarily have the skills of a sort of 50-year accomplished coppersmith, of which there's very few around. And also because the guy I started the distillery with, 2 of my friends, one who's a beekeeper and the other guy is an engineer, and he's a very interesting guy. Lives in Sausalito on a houseboat. He's a maker, history of a computer engineer and scientist, and he said, why are they that shape? Why can't we make them something? And I said, well, copper contacts everything. And he was like, well, if you want copper contact, you want to be a pyramid. That's the largest volume to surface area ratio. and that's an easy shape to make out of copper, but pyramid stills probably weren't that practical. So yeah, it ended up being a geodesic. As experimental really, and we used that on our first still, the whole geodesic thing, but that was pretty impractical. So we just used it on the shoulders, and it's worked well, as you'll see, hopefully, when you taste our whiskey.
So was some of that, did that shape help make the building of the stills a bit easier because you could just go piece by piece by piece?
Yeah, so so traditionally, obviously, it's beaten out of a whole single piece of copper. So this was lots of different reasons. We made it in CAD, the design in AutoCAD, out of these little these triangles. So we water jet the triangles. So you can use smaller pieces of copper, which are cheaper. You can replace bits if they break as well. And so we laser jet them, actually water cut the triangles, hand bent them, and then riveted them together, and then welded that to make the shape. There's photos on our website if anyone's interested in the in the crazy construction. And we built it in the shed, and I guess that it was just an easy, practical way of making a dome shape that had a large surface area. And we didn't know if it was going to work, but it turned out it worked great.
Wow. But it's only on one of your stills. Am I correct in that?
In our first, we've built a bunch of different stills over the years. And our first two stills that really worked well. The first one was completely geodesic, and the second one was just on the shoulders. So our wash still had it just on the shoulders. Our spirit still was completely geodesic. On our brand new stills that we've just had commissioned by Speyside Copperworks, we got someone that knew what they were doing to make them for us this time. Gary Fraser, who's a true gentleman, and Derek as well, who's a genius at Speyside Copperworks. They were the only ones that would entertain the idea of doing this thing. So they embraced the madness, and we said, well, we want an onion-shaped still for minimum reflux because we're a peaty distillery and we wanted a lot of those lovely peaty flavors to come over in a wash still, but we still wanted our maximum copper content in the spirit still. So we incorporated those, slightly different geometry, slightly different design, made a bunch of different prototype mules, and what Derek did, and finally came out with the design that you'll see on our website, which is the ones that have just been installed.
I realize we came out of the gate in the geekiest part of the conversation, but I need to continue with this. So I'm curious here. So
it's not going back to the other side of the gate ever.
No, yeah, we're geeks, man. You're in the geek zone, I'm afraid.
So why would geodesic is the word, correct?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess the geodesic's a term to describe a certain particular shape. The idea is to try. The idea is to try and get as many flat surfaces as you can for interaction with the copper, with the set volume you've got. So the still size volume inside is set to whatever it is, 2,000 liters, 3,000 liters, and then the smallest volume to surface area is a pure sphere, and the biggest is a pyramid. So the more flat surfaces you can get, then we've got lots of interaction with lots of reflux going on, and lots of interaction with the whiskey on those flat surfaces, and that's what you want. So it creates quite a nice light spirit. We've used it on our spirit still because that gives us a lot of control, so we can run that harder or slower, and that's really the wash still is just get that good stuff out as fast as you can to retain a lot of that peaty goodness. But the spirit still, you really want to tweak your profile, and that's why we've done it that way.
Perfect. You answered my question without me having to ask it. I really wanted to know why it was beneficial to put that shape on your spirit still as opposed to your wash still, because what I assumed is exactly what you said, right? Where you're doing a good bulk of the work in the wash still, and then you get to fine tune with your spirit still, and you can adjust as you see. So there you go. You have fully answered it. Thank you.
I was curious, just in talking about the copper, we hear, the mythology out of Scotland that you replace a still, and if it had a dent in it, you put a dent in the same place in the new one. Here you are working through multiple designs and multiple designers. Any thoughts there about your your spirit that you've been building over a decade, and how that changes as you move design here?
Yeah, I think that's the fun part of what we're doing, which is we're still getting the problem is, I guess, is that you get a whiskey you like, and the big question is how much does that whiskey change over the years, over the decades? Lagavulin 16, how much is it the same as it was 10 years ago? I don't know the answer to that question. I think that what we found is that this concept of putting little dings or hammer marks or stuff into a still, I'm not really sure that that's real. Or how that works, because there's so many variables. But I guess if everything stays the same all the time, then little things probably do make a difference. But I mean, we found that there's so many variables in doing this the handmade way. So we're a craft distillery, and by that I mean we're still physically, it's not a press the button, whiskey comes out the other end. We're pretty much hands-on with everything we do. And so that human element increases the variables. And so I think that, the stills, sure, they're part of it. But I'm sure there's much larger, variations come from, obviously, your barley, your cuts, how hard you dry the stills, the speed of distillation, the temperature, ambient temperature outside, and temperature in your brew house is going to affect your reflux. All these things, there's so many variables.
Yeah.
So,
that makes good sense.
Yeah. So I think that, with these big guys, yeah, sure. I mean, that's their profile is their profile, and you don't really want to mess with it. For us, we're still in that really fun stage of put this in, see what comes out, wait 5 years later, start cracking the barrel open. Oh, that was good. What do we do? What was and we've written everything down, as you'll see in our tasting packs. We're nothing if not methodical in what we do. Yeah.
So with that in mind, right? It really sounds as if you're discovering yourselves, right? You're in that evolution period of seeing how you're making your whiskey and what it could become, and maybe you're going to tweak it here or there. But I wonder if from the outset you took inspiration from any particular distilleries to sort of, try to follow that path.
Not really. I think that, the story starts way back 2008 with one of my business partners, a beekeeper. And we had all this sugar water from washing down the honey frames. And we started off actually making a mead and then distilling the mead in a little pot still we had. New Zealand's got crazy laws. I mean, you can go and buy a still and get into it, without having a license, and away you go. So,
nice.
so we were making initially sort of distilled mead, and I'm a whiskey lover, and so it was a simple step then to get some beer and start boiling that, and away we go. And so the realization that actually, hey, we can make whiskey here, dawned on us slowly, and it was always an ambition. But in those experimental early days, we were trying to make all sorts of stuff, anything we could, see how it went. And it wasn't until we met this guy called Tony Denny, which is I'm doing a lot of talking here, but that's a long story. But Tony is a brewer, a very famous brewer in New Zealand, who was part of the Lion Nathan Group for 30 odd years. He started as a very young man as an apprentice, and I met him through a charity that I worked for that he sponsored, and he came on the scene and taught us how to brew. When we started to learn how to brew, that really and then opened up this world of New Zealand malts and barley and various things that were so exciting that we didn't really look to anyone else for any inspiration. We're just, we're going to make a New Zealand product. This is what we're going to do. Away we go. So that's how it happened.
So given that we came out the door getting geeky about stills, given what you've just said, Mark, I'm going to jump ahead to a question I was going to ask much later, which is, right now in the US, we're having this wonderful reckoning around what is an American single malt. And here you are just now saying, we just set out to make a good New Zealand spirit. Is there anything in the books? Are there parameters that you must operate within to be a New Zealand whiskey? Or is it those three basic ingredients that you've been talking about and everything else is pretty much allowed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so the history of whiskey in New Zealand dates back a long way. You know, the Scots were a large part of our history for people coming into the country, and there were a lot of distilleries operating back in the day. As far as and then that kind of reached a hiatus, and I think when Wilson's was sold, that was really the end of New Zealand large-scale whiskey production, and then things slowly started up in the 2000s again with little craft distillers like us. So recently we've put together the New Zealand Whisky Association to beat out a few rules around this, but it's pretty loose. Essentially, it's got to be 100% New Zealand barley. It's got to be double distilled in coppice pot stills, and it's got to be a minimum of 2 years old before you can call it whiskey and sell it. And just those three ingredients are the basis of where we're at. So that's to make it no using a single malt.
And has to be bottled in New Zealand as well.
It does, yeah. I mean, I've got the full list of rules, but I won't bore you with them. But I mean, it's so
there's like a guideline that's been set since, when was that agreed upon? Like 2020 or 2021, just quite recently.
Yeah.
And so that's from the DSA, so that's the Distilled Spirits Aotearoa being the Maori name for New Zealand. And then out of the DSA has now formed the New Zealand Whisky Association. And so they're kind of taking on that work, those guidelines that have been laid out, and anyone that's a member of DSA, of course, agrees to abide by those guidelines, but it's not a legal requirement. So there are other things being made in New Zealand that currently are called whisky and don't fit within those. But when that becomes law, which hopefully will be soon, then it's as enshrined in law as Scotch whisky regulations and any other country that has regulations.
Nice. Do you think that'll then allow the category to build globally, or is that just rules within the sandbox for how you all want New Zealanders to be doing this? What do you see the future ramifications of this being?
Well, I mean, I'm a founding member of the Whisky Association New Zealand, so we've got our reasons to do it, which is to protect the category, essentially. So, and what I mean by that is that we want to establish New Zealand whiskey as a thing that people say, oh, that's pretty good, that New Zealand whiskey. And to have that, it has to have a few things in our book, which is hopefully made of New Zealand products, just not a facsimile of Scottish whiskey. You know, we don't want to be Scottish still, Scottish barley, just made in New Zealand. But we also want to protect quality and integrity. That means that the brand of New Zealand whiskey is protected going forwards, make good product. And so people feel that if they're buying this stuff, it's just not imported Scottish whiskey that's relabeled, or, you know, it's not got a bunch of additives in it and bits and bobs. So, you know, our guidelines are very similar to Scotland. You can chill filter if you want to. You can. The only thing you're allowed to add is non-flavored coloring, which is the caramel. Personally, we don't do either of those things. But I mean, for a couple of the bigger whiskey distributors who felt that was important to maintain consistency, particularly in coloring for the Asian market, you know, that was decided that was definitely fair enough. But I think the idea is what we're trying to do as a group, and it's a very cohesive group of I mean, it's a pretty fledgling industry, is to try and get New Zealand whiskey as a high quality product that's out there, that people can say, oh, actually, you know, that New Zealand whiskey, like Japanese whiskey, you know, is good. I might give it a go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think like Japanese whiskey and Indian whiskey are good examples to look to for New Zealand. I think that Indian whiskey's certainly done a lot of the good work for educating consumers on the fact that it doesn't have to be 12 years old and up. It can be 5 or 6 years old, because it's a different climate and maturation works differently here. So I think that has certainly laid the way for people that maybe 10 years ago would have, or 10, 15 years ago would have scoffed at the idea of Japanese whiskey. Now they're the ones going into shops and saying, "Have you got any Japanese whiskey? I've heard it's good." And so we're kind of following behind those other New World whiskies that have set the path for us.
Nice.
Yeah. A couple of years back, we, in our first interview with Lee and Bree at Backwoods Distilling out of Yakandanda, hopefully I got that one right. I know it's a different country, but still, they talked about their climate, and there would be these massive shifts in temperature in the day, where you're real cold in the morning, and then by the evening it's sweltering, and corks are. Bung corks are popping everywhere. Are you finding similar climate where you guys are? What is that climate, and how does it affect your whiskey?
Yeah, well, for the listeners who don't know, so we're on a little island in the Pacific, just outside of Auckland, which is the largest city in New Zealand. It's about 1.7 million on the city, and a 30-minute ferry ride takes you to Waiheke, and from there, there's about 10,000 residents on this island, and it's predominantly a wine-growing region. So it's pretty temperate, but it has a maritime climate with huge barometric pressure changes and temperature swings. You may have heard the song Four Seasons in One Day, and that's kind of, it's controversial what it was written about, whether it was New Zealand or Melbourne, but it's pretty similar sort of climate. I mean, things can get pretty hot and pretty cold pretty quickly. And so we do notice, and in summer, hot, but then you have these big thunderstorms rolling in, and like at the moment, it's very unstable weather. And so you do get these huge barometric pressure changes, and we've noticed our angel share can be crazy high. And that's we coined this phrase dog ears, which is our second tasting pack we just released, which is this idea that our whiskey ages pretty fast compared to some of the stuff that maybe is in a colder, more settled climate. We had a guy out from Singapore visiting recently, and I cracked the top of one of the barrels of this port finish that we've done, and I gave it a taste, and I said, "How old do you think that is?" And he was like, "Oh, I don't know, it's pretty nice, maybe 10 or something." I said, "We made it like a year ago." It went in the barrel like in January or something, and so it's quite interesting. It's deceptive what happens, but our angel share is huge. The top of the barrel stack can be 30 odd degrees, and it varies from year to year, but it's not unheard of to get up to 10-15% loss in some of these barrels. We age them vertically, stack them vertically, fill the bung in the side and palletize them, stack them vertically, but to try and stop a little bit of the loss. But it's just crazy. So and that's in itself is a bit that defines our category. I mean, it's something that's different about New Zealand whiskey, and probably Melbourne Starwood. I mean, look at the success those guys have had. Melbourne's a similar sort of thing. Yep. So I think we're seeing quite a big shift in and that's why we don't use age statement, even though some of our whiskey is quite old for New Zealand whiskey. Some of it's 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. We tell you when we made it and when we bottled it, but the rest of it's up to you to decide what's going on.
You have to be good at math.
So the whiskeys that I have in here, we've got your Peter Newmark, your Moss, your Cirrus One, and the Bog Monster. You said there's whiskeys in there aged up to 7, 8 years old?
Yeah, well, in this pack,
is that?
Not quite so old. The Bog Monster's the oldest one in this pack. I'm trying to remember. I don't even remember when we bottled that. When was that? So that's 7 years old, the Bog Monster. The peated... We actually started non-peated, so the dog ear is the second pack that's just released, that you'll be on its way to both of you very shortly. It's some of our older whiskey, because we started off as a non-peated distillery because there was no New Zealand peated barley around when we started. But really, we love peat. We love New Zealand peat, and we can talk about that for hours. But I mean, it's I guess if there's one thing that represents our point of difference, and one thing that the rest of the world can't replicate, it's what did Dave Broom's new book, that sense of place, Colin was saying.
Sense of place.
Yeah. So it's our own sense of place, our own Mark Renier's terroir or whatever. I mean, it's our own sense of place, which is our New Zealandness, that we thought would be the thing that really came out in this, and that's why we were so keen to put the New Zealand peat pack out. I mean, only 10% of our whiskey drinkers in New Zealand like peated whiskey, but I mean, we're a niche geek whiskey maker, and this is what we like, and so that's why we put it out.
Since we're here, do you want to start telling us about New Zealand peat? It seems like the perfect moment.
And which whiskey should I pour as you're talking about that?
Well, the peat.
Might as well start with the new make.
Sorry, Jason.
Yeah. I mean,
the new make. Okay. Oh, yeah.
I think that the new make, it's one of those things that you don't maybe get to try terribly often, but it probably says more about a distillery than anything else, which is what your new make tastes like, and smells like, and the new make is Colin's probably best at describing the whiskies way better than me. He's much more eloquent, but I think that the DNA of us, as he really shows through in peated new make. But I'll tell you a little bit about New Zealand peat, and then maybe Colin can talk you through it, the whiskey. But it's New Zealand peat's different than the same as Isla peat's different than mainland Scottish peat. It's pretty lignin poor. A lot of our trees are resinous and they don't break down so well, and so the podocarp forests, and big kauri trees, and a lot of the trees they stay around unbroken down for tens of thousands of years. People dig them up and make tables and stuff out of them. But our peat's different. The peat comes through differently. It tastes differently. It comes in on the back end. It's not as in your face. Even though there's 40 ppm in that new make phenolics like a Port Charlotte, but it's just a different beast, and that's what we love about it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so drinkable. This is remarkable new make. It's there's some new makes excuse me, there's some new makes that you'll taste and you say, "Oh, that's awful." But it's going to be good 12, 15, 20 years from now, and then some that are good and some that are excellent. Jason, I hope, is there a new make in the tasting pack he's going to be getting? Because he needs, as a new make junkie, he needs to try this.
He'll be getting both.
Oh
he'll be getting both the tasting packs.
This is remarkable new make. Really well done.
Okay. Do you sell your new make, or you just use it within the packs to kind of show what you're becoming, or
show what happens once it meets wood? Packs. We've got no intention to sell new make in anything bigger than these sample pack bottlings. We want to focus on releasing aged spirit, but it's to give a glimpse of what's there. And people have said to us, "I'll buy it in a bottle," but that's not what we're about.
It's so funny, right?
We're Waiheke whiskey, not Waiheke new make spirit.
right, and that's the thing. It's always the geek's question, and I include myself amongst that number, right? Where I would love to be drinking some new make, have some new make available, and it's so interesting because producers always say the same thing. We're not in the business of new make. New make is what we put in the cask. We're in the business of selling the mature stock. And it's just such an interesting kind of disconnect between geeks and producers. But I think even to have it available in a tasting format, I think is very kind and very generous. We don't necessarily need to be buying full bottles of new make, but I certainly would.
Yeah, and I think that's just all.
It really is nice.
That's part of our transparency in sharing the story. Is here's the new make. This is what it is, and this gives you an idea of what hopefully the DNA or the thread that runs through all our whiskies is, and so that allows you that glimpse of Waiheke whiskey before it's whiskey.
So given that Mark opened the door for you, Colin, how do you present the new make? How do you describe it?
So I think the main thing that runs through our whiskies which perhaps you don't get as much on the nose as more so on the palate, is the salinity. So another thing that's perhaps an unexplained, but we're on an island. We're aging everything on the island. Is it coming off the sea? Who knows? And so it's got a salinity on the nose. I think it's got more cereal notes perhaps than fruit notes. The fruits are probably currants. There's kind of currants, maybe a little bit of blueberries perhaps, and some earthiness. So it's quite an earthy smoky whiskey spirit.
I love. You haven't mentioned pear yet, and that's what I'm not necessarily finding on here is pear, which is usually quite pronounced in Scottish new make, but I'm not really finding it so much in this.
Yeah. So yeah, I think on the palate you get that salinity or kind of sea spray, and quite a drying finish. So all our whiskies have quite a drying finish.
It sounds terrific. I think I closed my browser, but I was looking at your webpage earlier, and I think I saw a description that was salinity and seaweed meets cigar smoke with a couple of toffees thrown in. And I have to say, you had me at salinity and seaweed, right? Everything after that was a bonus, but salinity and seaweed sounded magnificent.
There's a good bit of grain presence as well, though. It seems to be ticking a lot of boxes for a new make. That salinity, the seaweed, I love that. But there's a grain quality to it as well, which is really it's hard to ignore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think on one of the tasting notes, it might be on the new pack on Dog Years, we talked about Wheat Bix. Is that? That's a product in the US.
Yeah.
And I had to check my UK, New Zealand English to make sure we were using the right term for New Zealand, because in New Zealand it's Wheat Bix. In the UK it's Wheat Abix.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is in the US.
Weetabix, same spelling as the
Weetabix.
UK, but only available in select stores.
Okay.
Certain pockets of America have it.
Right. The British stores.
Exactly. Same place you buy your double deckers.
Yeah. So I think that graininess, maybe not so much on the peated because the peat, the smoke's covering over it a little bit, but I think more so on our non-peated new make, you get that wheat bix, that grain, that kind of wheat element or cereal element. Yeah.
Very nice.
I think I was just thinking maybe we can talk a bit about the maltsters. So we've used a few different maltsters, but the main one that we're working with now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, is with Gladfields. And so Doug and Gabby at Gladfields have been really, really great partners to work with, I think, to get the peated spirit or the peated malt more and more peatier. So they're constantly working at how they can up that peat level. Yeah,
Doug's a genius with. Gladfields have made a real mark for themselves with New Zealand peated barley, and Doug and Gabby are an incredible success story. Really, sort of built the whole thing themselves. From scratch down the South Island in South Canterbury, including building a lot of the malt house themselves and the buildings and the kilns and bits and bobs by hand, and so they and Doug himself basically taught himself how to do peated malt. It's wet peated. It's not dry peated. A lot of these. We were over in Tassie recently, and a couple of guys are trying to peat post malted barley. But I think Doug's doing it right, and it really shows in the new make the quality of the spirit. But you're trying to compare always. The problem with this stuff is you're always trying to compare it to something which is your peated stuff from Scotland. And I think that we're really happy with where our new make's at now. It's gone through a lot of different iterations, but it's how it interacts with the wood that's really fascinating, and what elements come out with the barrels. And we're still learning all this stuff, So we talked about port barrel before. You wait till that comes online. we had to make the port first because we couldn't get any port barrels. So Paddy, who's our distiller, is also a winemaker for Mudbrick, a very famous winery on the island. So, to get port barrels, we had to make port. So we made port for the winery for them first, and left it in there for a couple of years, and then took the port out, and then we put the peated whiskey in the barrels that we've made because. Again, a big part of our story is sustainability, and again, we could go on about that for a long time. But shipping. I mean, everything we're trying to touch, we've tried to do locally, including learning how to recouper wine barrels and use this fantastic resource that we've got here on site. So pretty much the only barrels we've bought in have been our bourbons and a couple of sherry barrels, and even those we got from Australia rather than from Spain. And everything else we've made ourselves. We've done our own STRs, we've done our own port, we've done our own wine barrel finishes, and that's just using what's around and what's local. And so, it's as you'll see as we work through the pack, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it's we've done everything with purpose to try and see. It's just been so much fun. Just take this stuff and stick it in a barrel and see what happens.
Yeah.
I was going to say actually on the wood there that I don't think I've seen a website be more transparent on the wood policy and even the dechar, rechar. There's the photo that you show of a red wine cask where you're saying like, look, this wine went in like a millimeter or two. Like there's still so much use from this barrel. And for all of our listeners, it's well worth going to your website and looking over those photos. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, thanks. So again, how much of it is, I mean, we'd be lying if we said, this is, we had barrels around and they're discarded essentially. They once they've had that superficial extraction out of them, they're done. And there's no cooperage on the island, and so it's really knock the heads off and get to it with an angle grinder, and now we have a spoke shave, but it was an angle grinder back in those days. Take all the stuff off, get the blowtorch out. Okay, how long are we going to char this for? Level 1, level 2, level 3, and then just do 3 barrels. And this is literally what we've done. I mean, we took 3 wine barrels the same. We charred them for different periods of time, stuck the same new make in them. And because we age so fast, within 2 years, you can tell where it's going in what direction. So it's been an experimental, fun time. But because that wood cost us nothing, really. I mean, they give away these barrels. They're $100, for a barrel. So and they're good quality, beautiful American oak, French oak barrels, and they're like new. Just that little bit of massaging is all you need. And we're not shipping them halfway around the world. I mean, they're just right there. Put them on the back of the truck and bring them over.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're really fortunate that there's like around 30 wineries on Waiheke Island, so there's an abundance of wine barrels available. We probably don't want to go too far down the route of becoming just a wine ski. A wine whiskey, but we have done some really interesting wine finishes. I think one of the things that we are still looking to expand upon or get more of as we start the new distillery going is more bourbon barrels, so fresh bourbon barrels. And if we can get a direct link to a bourbon distillery, shout out anybody listening, or anyone that knows one. And so
good luck, mate. Get in line.
So if we can get that steady stream, we've got that base of the bourbon barrels, and then we can do a lot of interesting stuff with the local wine barrels, which we've already done, and just the wine finishes.
So here's my question on that, and I was thinking this when I was going over your website, because I think you make the same point on the website that bourbon maturation is really where you want the distillery to live, and that's important. And you've just said the same thing, Colin. Given what you're saying about sustainability, given what you're saying about availability, given what you're saying about coopering and decharring, rechar, SDRing on site, why? Why keep bourbon in the equation, and why try to keep bourbon so important to the distillery when you seem to have these other opportunities? What's guiding that?
One of the problems with the rapid maturation is just how hot things get so fast. Things get over oaked real quick. And the problem with the minute you shave and retoast a barrel. So there's a big differentiation here we should maybe point out. So these are the minute you take a wine barrel and you shave and retoast it, it's no longer a wine barrel, right? We've shaved all of that wine out of there. It's now shaved and retoasted barrel, right? So that's a little bit different. And so if you said to me, if we continued with this current climate of shipping costs and environmental problems, what's going to happen to us in 10 years? Then we're going to be reusing a hell of a lot more barrels than we do now. And we're going to be reusing these bourbon barrels. And the reason why we like bourbon is because it just works so, as you'll see, hopefully, you'll think the same as us. It just works really well with our peat. So it introduces a creaminess and that just gentle softness. And in other words to describe our whiskey as soft. Some people have described it as ethereal, and which is a weird term because often what you're expecting, I think our expectations of New World whiskey or young whiskey is often it's hot, it's all over the place. But what's happened with what we've been doing with the bourbon is it gives us a lovely soft finish, and we don't necessarily see that from our wine barrels, but maybe that's because we're not doing it right. That's quite different to our wine barrel finishes, where we're literally taking a barrel, rinsing it out. It still had wine in it, and then, or even sometimes not rinsing it out, just literally emptying it, chucking like in our Chardonnay finish, and so that's different. I mean, that's finishing an already established aged whiskey. But I guess to answer your question, maybe I haven't, maybe I've come across wrongly with what we've been doing, but we have been trying to get consistency. And where we get consistency is with our imported bourbon barrels. They're all JD barrels, and they're all the same. So that gives us a level of consistency that we can achieve that we can't really get any other way at the moment until we're talking about clubbing together, 2 or 3 of us distilleries. There's a guy called Matt John's got a fantastic distillery in Pocono who also owns Tullibardine. We've been talking about getting together and getting a machine that we can pop the barrels on and recooper them and clean them and char them and do it a little bit more and get a cooper between us and all this kind of stuff. So I think as we move forwards, the bourbon's been our only source of consistent barrels, and that's really the answer to your question. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your transparency. I appreciate your thoroughness as well, Mark. The thing that gets me in listening to you is I've got Virginia Distillery Company down the road from me, and 25% of their current stock is in STR, what they call cuvee. But they also have a high percentage of bourbon, ex-bourbon casks on site, and that ex-bourbon really allows their spirit to shine through. And in one of our recent episodes, talking with Amanda Beckwith over there, we went through barrel by barrel by barrel, going type, not individual barrels, going over like, what are you seeing there? What's that style bringing to the table? And so to hear you talk about consistency and a nice baseline, it's what everything's built off of. It's a good, thorough answer to the question. So cheers.
Thanks, mate. Talking of cheers, should we try another whiskey? Or a whiskey?
I think so. This is thirsty work. Yeah, so what should we go with next?
So the Moss next.
Moss, okay.
So the Moss is our peated, of course, 5-year-old. So again, we don't put 5 on the front label, but distilled 2017, bottled 2022. And the barrel sequences, it's been an American oak, which has been shaved, toasted, and recharred, or dechar, rechar terminology, and then also an ex-bourbon.
Yeah, the spirit shines through. There are notes from the new make that I'm also getting here. And what's the ABV on this?
So this one's 44%. Yeah.
44.
Yeah. So it was interesting.
That's an interesting.
Yeah. When we were getting to the point of deciding what strength we're going to bottle these at, we tried them at different strengths. I think Mark had already kind of had it at at 44, and this was just about when I got on board with Waiheke Whisky, and we played around in the barrel room with different strengths, and I was trying to push for 46 because I love 46% and think it's a golden number. but we did try it at 44, at 46, at 50, and at straight out the cask. And actually at 44 was where the peat came through best. So as the alcohol got higher, it lost the peatiness. So we did just pull it back down to 44, and I think it's just where it shines.
Quick question regarding peatiness. You know, in Scotland, when we look at Kilchoman, Ardbeg, we can rattle off the names. They talk specifically about their ppm like you do. You're at 40 ppm. And quite often they find in the first couple of years, the peat actually seems to be amplified through the course of maturation, and then it dips back down. And then as the years go on, the peat just kind of gets matured out, just made much softer. What have you found, with this being a 5-year-old, what have you found so far with your whiskeys, what your peat is doing on that maturation journey?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, the new make, obviously, bang, it's peaty straight off the bat. As I was saying about that Singaporean guy, by about the end of a year, you could, in the port barrels in particular, it's got beautiful color already. It's blood red almost. And it just tastes fantastic. Yeah. When is the right time to release these whiskeys? Is probably more the question. And you can release them at different times and it's a different thing. Is it better at 10 years? It's different. Some people would say, it's better. We find definitely the peat is absolutely right. So the peat's really full on. It mellows out with interactions with the wood. The tannins start to come out and the peat takes a back seat. But for us, what's interesting is that high ABV, it's whether it's a spirit forward drink or a wood forward drink, and the higher ABVs definitely masks the peat, and the peat's better at lower ABV. And if you put a drop of water in the new maker and the peat comes out even more. But over time, the peat mellows. And so for us, almost getting some of this peat out at 3 years would give us a much more peaty whiskey, which is kind of where we've been driving towards a bit more peat, bit more peat, bit more peat. But then, we've had opportunity to test this in our bar. So we've got a bar called the Heki with on the island. It's a restaurant bar with a local brewery, and the sherry finish is the most popular, but the moss is a very popular drink behind the bar, because I think the peat heads do seek us out, but most people aren't looking for that level of peatiness. Then maybe we are, the geeks are.
Wow. It's so funny, you keep talking about peat, and this is unlike any other peated whiskey that I've had, and so my mind or my palate is trying to make sense of it, because it doesn't come off as peat. It comes off almost toasty and soft and warm. And then earthy, but there's not necessarily, it doesn't resemble Islay in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I would say that so often people talk about the difference between like Islay peat and Highland peat, and Islay peat being more iodine and Highland peat being more sweeter, or maybe a bit citric. And I think that Waiheke whisky, or I should say New Zealand peat, sits to the other side of Highland peat, so it's not next to Islay peat. It's over the other side of Highland peat, I would say. So it's more on that sweet side of the spectrum.
Yeah, there's a beautiful, like, bright citrusy finish at the end. I wouldn't even call it citrusy, but there's a brightness at the end, almost like a confectioner's sugar, just sort of pops with a brightness and then fades out. This is really lovely.
One of the main notes I get always on the nose on this one is like licorice. It's quite like a dark licorice note. I hosted a tasting with this, and there was one guy that was just perplexed at saying, how do you get that flavour of Irish moss in there? And I was saying, what's Irish moss? And I don't know if that's a thing in the US or not, but it was something that I hadn't come across yet. I've been in New Zealand for 7 years, but I hadn't come across Irish moss, which is like cough drops that you get at the pharmacy. And so they've got a bit of I think like a licoricey kind of menthol perhaps flavour to them. And so this guy was just completely confused at how we actually get the taste of Irish moss cough drops into the whiskey.
Is Irish moss as intense as Fisherman's Friend? Do you have Fisherman's Friend down by you?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. No, it's not. No, it's similar, but it's not as intense.
Okay.
It's a little chewy.
Yeah.
It's a little chewy candy, sugar coated candy with this Irish moss stuff in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was curious as well, just that we'd called the whiskey moss, and this guy was just getting Irish moss.
Yeah, right.
On it.
Yeah, what's the story behind moss, or is it just that peat moss, and you're trying to highlight the peaty aspect of your whiskey?
Well, it's not. It's not. It's to almost take away from the peaty aspect of it. I mean, it's what it reminded us of. I guess it's a bit onomatopoeic in a way, but it's sphagnum moss. A lot of it's sphagnum moss peat anyway. We have Restedad peat bogs that are quite different than the high water content peat bogs. This is a shallow peat made of rushes and flax and moss and sedges and stuff and compacted down. And so it just imparts that, and it just had that sort of forest floor, gentle earthiness to it that just reminds you of like a mossy blanket or something like that. And so that we name our whiskies after various certain geeky things. And this was just a great name for this whiskey. It just tasted like moss, so we called it moss.
I love it.
It's what it says on the packet.
Sometimes they name themselves.
Absolutely, yeah.
What else is in your peat? So you've got flax, sphagnum moss. Do you ever find eucalyptus showing up in your peat? Oh wow.
Yeah, eucalypts and these podocarps, eucalypts. Manuka and Kanuka is tea tree. So we have, that's a predominant native and a big component of that. So tea tree, eucalyptus, you can taste all those things, sandalwood, jasmine, all those flavors are kind of in there, wedged in into this moss. And it's we just thought it was quite a nice, gentle introduction, a gateway into New Zealand peat, really. Because peat is just such a divisive word, When people come in, and I always ask them at the bar, what would you normally drink? Oh, I don't like that peaty stuff, that lager, whatever it's called. They'll say that lager stuff or the Freud or the stuff that tastes like burning hospitals. So it's like the moss, and I like that. What's that? Well, it's our peated whiskey, but it's a different type of peat, and that's kind of how we get you hooked.
It's so tough, right, to have somebody walk in and say, "Oh, I don't like those peaty Scotchies," and then yours is nothing like that, right? It seems. I've always said this, we've talked about American whiskey and Scottish whiskey. It's the same. It's a shame it's the same word, because they're doing very different things. And it's a shame the word peat is consistent between those two, because it seems like your flavor profile is presenting something else, right? To the point that people like it when they don't necessarily like Isla peat, which not everybody likes Isla peat.
Yeah, I think also, it's what people are introduced to the first time round. And if you're having a Lefroy or an Ardbeg, it's not for the faint-hearted. And that can put you off peat pretty quickly. And also people maybe try that early on in their whiskey journey and then slip back to something not so peaty and I prefer that. And, that certainly happened to me. I mean, over time we grew to love peat, and then I became a peat head, but I didn't start there. And So we were pretty conscious of that and of course this is our first foray to the public, right? Who are we? What are we going to be? You know, and you've got a relatively, what's the right word? The New Zealand public. This is a New Zealand whiskey, and we've got to try and put our best foot forward. What do we do? How do we do that? How do we get that out there? We've got to be careful with high ABV, because, you know, that although the geeks love high ABV, your average person picking up a pack or buying it for granddad doesn't love high ABV. So again, all these things, you know, were really important to us when we thought, well, how are we going to launch this thing? What are we going to do? That's why we put the pack out. So we've got high ABV in the pack, but we've also got low ABV in the pack. So, you know, that's why everyone said, why'd you do that first? Why don't you do a first release bottle? Because that kind of really railroads you into something that we're not, which is we're not a high volume producing distillery at the moment. We might become that, but right now we're still sussing out. We're just showing the world what New Zealand can do, I guess.
I love that idea from you as well. As you were talking earlier, we had something very similar, not being producers, but when we put out our Kilchoman 4-year-old in our first 3 bottles, and people said, this is fantastic. Can you imagine what it would be like at 8 or 10 or 12? And we said the same as you, Mark, which was it would be different, right? It wouldn't be this version of it, but aren't you loving that version of it? And they would say, 4 seems a bit young, or it seems a little bit raw. It's like, you loved it a second ago, right? And so for you as both a geek and a producer, in listening to you, you seem to be striking that balance where you are trying to say, look, we could put this cask into this bottle tomorrow and it'll be an example of that cask tomorrow. Or we could sit on it for 2 more years and put that into bottle. Do you have moments where I'm trying to ask this the right way, but where you're kind of not quite second guessing yourself, but everything seems possible at once? And do you then sometimes have paralysis from that just kind of general excitement?
Oh, I think that defines us. That's not a question. That's who we are. Yeah, I mean, we didn't have a brand we only just got a brand like last year, because there were so many iterations of who Waiheke Whisky was and what the name was, and you know, so and I guess the brand
you entered it into spirits competitions under. Was it Izzard first? Was
yeah,
the first
just
one?
under my name.
It was under that?
Yeah, just under Izzard.
Oh, wow.
Because we just didn't really know who we were or what we were doing. We were just making whiskey. I mean, literally, we were making whiskey for making whiskey's sake. I mean, that's really what we were doing.
Yeah.
We've all got day jobs still. And, you know, this was a hobby that got really out of hand pretty quickly. But we started off making whiskey for whiskey's sake, and then when you do that, I guess you're just concentrating on the whiskey, and the bottling and the packaging and the peripherals just the last thing. That a lot of these brands get created as brands. They're selling new make, they're selling gin, they're selling vodka. We did it the other way around. We just made the whiskey, kept making the whiskey, and then when we were ready to do it, we thought, okay, now it's ready to release, and we've got stuff to back ourselves up, and we've got a nice catalogue of stuff we can release and keep people interested in it, and try and make it the geek's way of making whiskey, I guess, which is making whiskey for whiskey's sake. And so with that comes this huge back catalogue of what are we going to do, what are we going to release first, what ABV, how much, you know, how are we going to price it? You know, we don't want to make it crazy expensive. Like a lot of the New Zealand whiskies have been $300 a bottle, and it's like, you know, well, we don't really want to do that. Because we want people to buy it and drink it. And then, so the tasting pack idea, whether or not it's a good idea or a bad idea, will be seen. But the idea was, well, let's try and get as much of our whiskey, just to show we're not a one-horse, you know, show, just to get our whiskey out there, different varieties quickly, and then people can say, oh, I like that one, don't like that one. All these guys are serious about what they're doing, I guess. And that's hence on the tasting mat, you know, we've tried to be as inclusive with the information as we can, for people to see what we've been up to.
I know you said a moment ago that you're.
I don't know if it answers the
No,
question.
you did. It's just Jason's going to follow up because that's what Jason does. But you said a moment ago about getting as much of this out and kind of seeing where it lands and seeing how it resonates. Is there a part of you when you're lying in bed at night, you are thinking about what a standard offering might look like, what form that would? Is there a goal to get to a standard offering, whether that's 4 years from now, 10 years from now, or 2 months from now? Is there an idea of that resonating with you?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there has to be. I mean, I think that it's all well and good doing what we're doing at the moment, and that's because we're having fun. We're having fun, and we're trying to establish. But it's also a bit of market research too. I mean, what sells, what doesn't sell, what people like, what they don't like. Sure, we can pig-headedly make what we want and forever, and this is what we're doing, and you better like it, and if you don't like it, well, and sure, the long tail's probably out there too, and probably people will buy it. But as we've got the capacity to make 1,000 bottles a day with a new distillery, you don't want to be doing that and people not liking it. So we do, but that's fun too, because we really know the direction we're heading in, which is sort of towards the end of this tasting pack, when you're starting to get into the Ceres and the Bog Monster. You see our DNA, you know where we want to be. And I guess the big thing is, are we going to be just peated or non-peated? And I think we've decided we're going to be both. We're going to do a Waiheke Whisky peated and a Waiheke Whisky non-peated. And a couple of barrel finishes here and there as special releases. But predominantly, yes, there's going to be a profile. We're going to stick to it, and that's what it is.
And we'll have our core ranges, which will be in different batches. So batch 2 of Moss might not be quite the same as batch 1 of Moss.
Sure.
And then we'll have Ceres. This is Ceres 1, which is the next one in our tasting pack. And then there'll be a Ceres 2 and a Ceres 3, and so on and so forth. And then the main non-peated release, which is part of the core range, is called the Sweetwater. So that's in the Dog Years tasting pack, the tasting pack 02. So we've got a lot of numbers and codes and release numbers and Ceres 1 and Ceres 2s.
Yeah.
But those will essentially be the core range, but with batch variation between them, and then special releases as well. So special release like Bog Monster, that comes under the SC. There'll be a tasting pack for that as well, which is Special Circumstances, which Mark can talk more to the name on that one. But then SC also for single cask, so special single cask releases.
There you go.
Yeah. So
The SC.
the SC. Well, the idea is that so we split the range into 4. It may seem initially confusing, but it's pretty simple. So we've got peated, non-peated, and then we've got wine finishes and sherry finishes. So sherry sort of sits on its own category, I think, and wine we've made a category, and we've color coded them. So green will be anything that's peated, light blue is anything that's non-peated, a deep dark blue is a sherry finish, and that may be peated or non-peated, and then our red is our wine barrel finishes, which are predominantly red wine barrels. And then special circumstances is anything that we think that stands out, that's a single cask, that will release super geeked whiskey, so high ABV or single cask or whatever, and that's our black label. So we split it into sort of, that's the idea moving forwards, and we'd like to continue with that if we can, because I think that there's something for everybody there, and we're never going to be we're never going to be the super high volume that warrants that single product, but
Sure.
hopefully we can get enough of a following that people say, I quite like that sherry finished PT one, the Series 1 or the Series 2.
And I think with different releases also it's part of the story, and it's an opportunity for people to compare them and say batch 1 compared to batch 2 to batch 3 of Moss, and potentially do a tasting with a vertical lineup of different batches of Moss.
Yeah.
Yeah, if geeks can do it with our big 10, they can do it with anything, right? Anything. And I've been among that number as well, so I know of what I speak.
So the Ceres 1, this is your sherry cask finish?
Yeah.
So
Did I have that right? Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually use, as Mark mentioned before, casks that came from Australia. So in Australia, a number of years ago, they stopped using the term sherry. It's in any official documentation, but it's still widely used because that's what people know it as. But the term in Australia is Apera, so Apera.
Yeah, sure.
So Apera just means Australian sherry. So it's Pedro Jimenez is the grape, and so it's been in American oak and then finished in PX.
Yeah, it's
And
got
so
a great nose to it.
And the name behind this one, Ceres, spell check doesn't like it and always wants to change it to series, but it's spelled Ceris, and so that's from the Arabic name for sherry, or Jerez. So that's back to the origins of Sherish.
There you go. Yeah, Sherish, yeah. That's great. Yeah, it's... before you were mentioning the cask that it was in, I got raisins, like golden raisins on the nose, and that's right there. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
And this one's at 42% rather than 44%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we need to know. 42%.
What was behind that one again, Mark? I forget.
Oh, I mean, this is our crowd pleaser, really. We needed a crowd pleasing whiskey, and the sherry bombs are, I guess, how do I put it? I mean, if we're putting out a geeks whiskey, I don't just necessarily think the sherry is for me the true. I think the sherry barrel maybe masks a bit of what's going on, and so in my perverted brain, I think of, well, let's make if this is the sherry finish, it's not necessarily our true DNA. It's not necessarily the true representation of our peated whiskey. This is a whiskey that we've made that people are like sherried whiskies that might like, and it just drank really nicely at 42, and we just wanted something in the pack that was really approachable, that was just nice and easy to drink, and you know, you might gift this to somebody that wasn't necessarily into really heavy whiskies, and maybe your dad would like this one. And so the idea behind this one, and in our non-peated range, the Sweetwater too, this is really the most approachable whiskey that we've made, as far as the peated range goes. So it's that real peat introduction with the sherry sweetness, and an approachable ABV that's sensible drinking, that's easy drinking, that's something that people just might like. And that was the idea behind it. Ceres 2 and Ceres 3 is up at 50% and is a PT sucker. But you know, let's introduce that one later down the track when we've got people calm down a bit and say, okay, well, I quite like that. I mean, sure, we risk alienating a few of the geeks, but then, you know, we do have that. You know, the idea is that, you know, we explain what we're doing and why we're doing it, and in our special circumstances range, we're releasing a whiskey called Cantankerous, which is a muscat finish, which is up at 48%, which is, you know, a really hardcore sherry style whiskey that will satisfy people, I think. So the idea is that we kind of, I guess we're being what you said before. We're touching our base. We're covering all our bases. You know, we're trying to gently bring people into the fold of this is what we can do, this is what we can make, and what do you like, and let us know, and this is what we like. Does that make sense?
But I also think, given what you'd said earlier about not chill filtering and not colouring, so that means your 42% is neither of those two things, correct?
Correct.
So how is that not appealing to a geek, right? Like, I think for us as geeks, I think we get scared by the 42 because, well, now we know it's being chill filtered and it's being coloured. For you to come along and say, listen, dude or dudette, right? This is 42%. We haven't touched it. We've brought it down to 42. Give it a try. Yeah. I think that sounds exciting. That sounds interesting. And then it's your transparency that's carrying the geeks. It doesn't have to be high octane liquid. It doesn't have to be, you know, the biggest sherry in the world. I think there's a way you're presenting yourself in a way that continues to be appealing to geeks. And I love what I'm hearing.
And that's one of the things that actually I realised when I took some or heaps of Waiheke whiskey over to Scotland when I was over in August, and just pouring it for different people and friends. And I know
we were so close.
I know. Yeah, you were there just after, I think.
Yeah. Just before and just after.
Just before and just after, yeah. So I caught up with Jess when I was there, and caught up with other whiskey friends. And one comment that I picked up on that somebody said was that they immediately just looked at the ABV and assumed it would be non-chill filtered. Oh, sorry, assumed it would be chill filtered. So that is something that obviously we need to educate on and talk about. But it's something that I've not yet noticed if anything happens to it when it gets to cold temperatures. Have you noticed anything, Mark? If it gets any haze or?
Well, this is.
I think they filled up pretty well.
I mean, if you want to get super geeky, filtration, and we can sit down and talk for a day on filtration, and there's lots of ways of doing it. A non-chill filter that are simple filtration, and you just have to look to the wine industry, or you can look to other places. One of the beautiful things about your first question was, by not having inspiration from anyone, means, and being away from everybody, just means that you just get on with it and just try things. And we haven't been doing. We don't have access to all the gear and the stuff that you have over there, and we just make do with what we've got. And so there's a big wine industry, and they don't chill filter stuff, and so we did lots of different filtration trials, and in the end we found that the less we filtered it, the better it tasted. And really all we needed to do all we really needed to do was to get the bits out of it, bits of wood and bugs and twigs and stuff like that. And then once we got those out of it, and just put it through a polishing filter, I mean, that's all we needed to do. And for people to understand that, sure, if you put ice in it, it might go a bit cloudy, well, so what? So that's really kind of
exactly,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
So that's where we ended up with it, and we were just determined to put it out where we wanted to, and so Cirrus 1 came out at 42.
No, that's cracking though, and Josh and I have talked this before in the podcast, and we were drinking with James Saxon of Compass Box in London, and the Spaniard was on the shelf, and it was 43%. And we'd have a conversation with James, like 43, like, what if you just done 46? And he said, but it tasted better at 43. And so there's that part to it of, I think as geeks, we need to be careful of falling into the types of patterns and traps that we accuse, the more mainstream drinker of falling into. Like we need to be careful how we talk and think and present ourselves. And I think we need to be alert and listen to producers coming along saying, look, don't walk away just because it says 42. Like hang around for 30 more seconds and listen. And I think there's something valuable to be learned there. And then the fact that the punchline to that is it tasted better there. Like that's what geeks want to hear. That's what we all want to hear is you spent time thinking about it and it tasted good, and now we've presented it to you. Like, let's not overcomplicate things. I commend you on that.
Yeah, I think we as geeks should want to hear that. There are still some that just, nope, it's not at least 46. We have a friend, I won't drop names, but if it's not in the mid 60s or up, he just doesn't want it. It doesn't matter if it tastes amazing. He doesn't want it.
Yeah, he wants it in the 70s.
He does want it in the 70s.
And that's where I think it's almost important to maybe even blind taste things, and then like again, maybe going back to the age thing about tasting it and saying, guess what age you think that is, and they think it's much older than it is, so maybe even taste it and they'll probably go, that's probably 46, because it's still got the good texture, I think, even at the 42.
Yeah,
it's got that mouthfeel, and I don't think it loses anything for being at 42.
Yep.
It had a peppery quality across the palate that made it seem brighter, more lively, and therefore it almost felt as if it was a higher ABV because of that peppery quality to it. Speaking of ABVs, we've got one last whiskey to taste, and we also have one sort of question we like to get everybody out on. But the Bog Monster is 46%, which is that magic ABV we were talking about.
There you go. Everyone's happy now.
Our listeners
Finally.
can stop driving off the road.
Finally.
Like, oh, thank God.
Got there in the end. Jeepers.
I do love over the course of this conversation, Mark, you have made a mockery of alcohol strengths. Like, I really love taking that away from this conversation, where now 46 doesn't mean anything more than 42 or the 44, but boy, do we feel comfortable because we've heard it. Like, it's such bullshit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we just, at the end of the day, we've got to like it. If we don't like it, we don't want to put it out. So if we like it, we'll put it out. Hopefully you'll like it. And I think one of the things we've discovered is that people, there's people that are not going to like it. There's people that are going to like it, people that aren't. But hopefully there's enough people out there that like it. And that's really who we're looking for. And maybe some people that will say, I didn't like it to start off with, but now I do. And so, we kind of stick to our guns, which is that first question, the other question you asked about, being paralyzed by it. In the end, you've just got to go for it and just say, well, look, I'm going to put out what I like. Yeah. And hopefully the tail's long enough that there'll be other people like me. And, and Colin's actually, a bit amazing. Here's the team. So we've got Tony Denny, who's an amazing brewer. So a great new mate comes from the great Wash. You've got Eric, who's a crazy engineer, who's designed this great gear for us. Ricky is a beekeeper who's just in touch with nature, who just helps. He's just amazing to have around. Paddy is a great one. He's one young winemaker of the year, like 3 or 4 times. He's incredible talent to bring to whiskey with that history of wine, ferments and stuff. And he's got an awesome palate. And then Colin, who's just got this encyclopedic knowledge of whiskey and has a great palate. And so, you put all these things together, and what we're doing is creating this thing, little collective of people that, and add my wife in for a bit of common sense. She keeps us
just so that we get stuff done, actually.
So we get stuff done, so we don't disappear into our navels instead of just talking about it. So so that's kind of what Waiheke Whisky is, and it's just having fun making whiskey, and then just giving you an expression of our fun. Which is hopefully it reflects in kind of what you drink. Bog Monster.
I want to hear Colin describe this before I give out my notes, because I have some very specific notes here, and I'm curious if I'm right. I'm curious if our palates align.
So Bog Monster is the most peated of this peat pack. So the previous two were lightly peated. This is heavily peated. Heavily peated currently, where we stand, maybe isn't quite the same as heavily peated for, it's not an Octomore, for other Scotch whiskies you might be familiar with, but there's a bit more smoke, but also some different characteristics that come across due to the different barrel sequence. So we've used some virgin oak in this. So I think you do get more vanilla and toffee coming through in the nose. Bit of cinnamon on the palate.
The 3 of us sipping while Jason just watches on, envious.
Sorry, man.
I'm sitting with our listeners right now. I'm like, okay, how's this working for our listeners?
So I think that pepperiness is still there in the palate. Dark chocolate, cacao, and earthiness, and again the salinity and drying finish.
Okay, wow. So you and I have some different palates going on.
Right.
The most immediate thing I got was cranberry sauce. It was this sort of red berry, sharp bitterness going on in there, and a little bit of pine, like balsam or fir or something like that. That's what was first presented to me on the nose, after having a sip, that's where the smoke starts to come in. And this is the first time for me tasting through these where the peat presented itself as smoke rather than an earthiness. On the palate, this may be the fruitiest whiskey of the three for my palate. It's very, very dense, almost jammy, but it's sitting atop this backbone of peat. The peat is the backbone, but the jammy fruitiness is kind of adding it's putting some pressure on the backbone there. It kind of wants to overtake, but it doesn't fully. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And I think, going back to ABV, maybe this one does have that touch more texture. Thanks to the 46%, so it's got a bit more oiliness.
I mean, the camphor.
Yeah.
The camphor is that bitterness. I think that we in our tasting notes. I mean, the sweet, but the maple bacon, the sweety kind of bacony stuff comes across for me with a bit of citrus, with a bit of lemon. So that gives you that sort of conflicting. It's an interesting thing that really is a mismatch for me is the nose and the palate on this whiskey. In fact, all of our whiskeys in some ways, but this one particularly is the nose and the palate are quite different for me. But we initially entered this at high ABV. At 55%. We called it Bog Monster because it was a monster. It was from the peat bogs and it was a very high ABV whiskey. We've stuck it at a couple of competitions and it bombed. And we just didn't get. And then we just took it down to 46 and it actually won Best World Whiskey this year. Took out the trophy. These are the Spirits Awards out of 184 blind tastings. Everything outside Scotland and Ireland, it won. And it just goes to show, I think, the ABV and where it sits. And we just wanted to put a really heavy ABV whiskey out there. And it taught us a lesson, which is, I think in these blind tastings too, ABV isn't everything. And so we pulled it back to 46 and all of a sudden it started winning goals. It's pretty much won a medal in everything we put it in. So that was a good lesson to us. And I think, a couple of distilleries in New Zealand have released their whiskies at high ABV, which is a really brave move, really high ABV. It costs more, smaller bottle. It's expensive to put out. You're really trying to educate people. You're trying to educate people about high ABV and sure, you hit the geek market, but you switch a lot of people off. And so, we just didn't want to switch people off initially. But, as we go through our packs and special circumstances, you're going to get some 10-year-old whiskey in there that's up at the 50s. Cantankerous is 48. This is 46. So we will gently release, when we think we're ready for it, we'll gently release those ones that we think drink better at those higher ABVs. But Bog Monster settled at 46.
They're all drinkers. This one is my favorite. I'm not sure if it has anything to do with the ABV. Just overall, the flavor profile just hits. I've got. I'm sorry. One real quick question before we go into our final one. I like how you talked about there's a delineation between the nose and the palate, and they are almost two different spirits in a way.
Yeah. Usually
in whiskey, that's not seen to be a great quality. In this case, I think it's been a great it almost felt like an evolution of spirit. And it reminded me of how people drink Sotol, right, which is a Mexican spirit. And that spirit is meant to have this disconnect between the nose, the palate, and the finish. And it's more viewed as an evolution. Do you see your own spirits do you see that disconnect as an evolution for the drinking experience, or do you view it as something you feel you need to close the gap between the nose and the palate?
I've never really thought about it, to be honest. I mean, okay. In that way, I don't mean to be rude. I mean, I haven't really thought about it in that way of an evolution.
Yeah.
I think that it is what it is, as far as we made Bog Monster. This is quite different in the way that we deliberately crafted this whiskey, and Cantankerous is the same in that the barrel sequence, we were experimenting with virgin oak. It didn't work out great. It got hot really fast with our Angel Share. It went crazy over oaked. We had to pull it back into bourbon just to calm things down a bit, which is a kind of reverse of how you normally do things. But it created these beasts we call the Bog Monster. And I think my comment on the nose and palate, the disconnect there, is it sneaks up on you on this whiskey. You're expecting one thing, you get something else, which are both pleasant. But I wouldn't be lying if I said that was a conscious thing that we set out to do. It's not. It was just. And then everybody liked this whiskey. I mean, it was a common thread that would. And the pack's arranged in this way. You start off with a new make. You get a little bit of peatiness in the moss. We divert off into a bit of an easy drinking sherry, and then you dip into the bog at the end. If you ask me where I'd like Waiheke whiskey to go, it's definitely the Bog Monster direction, where we're getting a bit more of that new. I think our new make shines best in the Bog Monster. Sure. Mm-hmm. Having said all that about ABV, we're up around 46%. So maybe there's something in that, but we're not going to admit that now. But then we're all whiskey geeks, right? So, I mean, and we do want to make geeky whiskey. Hopefully we do make geeky whiskey. But the nose palate disconnect thing is something that everybody points out on this whiskey, but not necessarily in a bad way. But I think that this is a special circumstance, Special Circumstances is a tribute to Ian Banks, who's one of my favorite authors. And Ian passed away, as you know, and a huge loss, both in science fiction and the non-science fiction. And Cantankerous is named after one of his spaceships out of the Culture series, and Special Circumstances is an nod to Ian Banks and what an incredible guy he was, an author. And I think that, the Bog Monster is one of our Special Circumstances whiskies. I mean, there's not much of it. It was an experiment gone wrong, a monster that had a happy ending. And so, a bit of a Frankenstein, if you like. What we've tried to do over the years is say, well, that's what we like, and let's try and how do we replicate that, but how do we get that more cohesive whiskey moving forwards? And I think you'll see as we evolve that we'll tighten up. Let's just get things a little bit tighter, a little bit more together. But it's fun nonetheless, and fun and quality are those two things that we try and put together. And the whiskey, it's not all serious. I mean, Scotch is pretty serious, right? Whiskey's a serious business, right? Yeah. You can't mess around with it too much. We're having fun, and hopefully that comes through in what we're doing.
It comes through in the conversation. Jason won't know this. It comes through in the spirit as well. Yeah, to
be honest, if the pack had come in, I've got such a horrible head cold right now that I wouldn't be tasting much anyway. So I'm okay. I'm not going to say I feel okay about the development, but I feel okay about the development. So I will enjoy them at a later date.
You can enjoy them when you come and visit as well.
There you go. Oh, as soon as you send me my plane ticket, I am there, Colin. Yeah. I am there.
Okay.
So make it pluralized. You'll have to do 2 plane tickets.
Your plane ticket's on its way on a slow boat.
Jason, you want to get us out of here on our final question?
So we always get out of here in the same way, and I feel like you've both been discussing it through the entire interview today, but if there's one or two things you want to focus in on, if you're able to, but we always finish by saying, looking at the year ahead, and I'm envious, you're just about to enter summer, so damn you both, and I hope you have a wonderful season. But as you look at the year ahead, what are you most excited about for yourselves, for your businesses, for what you're staring square in the face?
Yeah, this is a huge year. I mean, we've both got some stuff to talk about, but I mean, I think for us, the launch of our new distillery, which is a custom built, it's carbon zero, distillery, we've built this thing which is using renewable energy. We've done a deal with Prime Energy for hydro and geothermal power, electric-fired steam boilers. That comes online, commissioning in March. We've got a special guest star coming out to help us with this. We can't talk about right now, but maybe later you'll see, to help us with our, so we're messing with the big boys now. I think that's what they say. So we've built a big distillery, and we're very excited about where all this talent that we've got around us can take this idea of we're incredibly blessed. I mean, we've got fantastic water, we've got great organic barley, we've got great climate, and we've got we've moved away from fossil fuels. Our bottles recycle glass. We use a screw cap, which is probably, I'll just squeeze that in at the end before we set another. Forget ABV. What about a screw cap? Oh my God! Made a recycled PTFE.
That's a beautiful screw cap that we're seeing.
You're in good company. This is the future of Single Cask Nation. So
yeah.
So there you go.
So I mean, I think that all of these things are really exciting and Colin, as we release our big bottles to the world. I mean, we've only released 500 of each of our Series 1 and Moss. But this year coming, we're going to launch the whole goddamn shooting match to the world, and also outside of New Zealand. So that will be very exciting to see how we go and how it's received. Launching the new distillery where people come and visit and do tours and tastings on site is going to be fantastic. That's both exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time, but that's what I'm looking forward to. Colin's just looking forward to having something to sell, aren't you, Colin?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've been in this role as Waiheke Whisky sales rep, brand ambassador for about a year, with not a lot to sell yet. So I've been pouring it for people, letting them taste it, and they're saying, "Where can we buy it?" And I'm saying, "Oh, you can't buy it yet. Sorry, you can't buy it yet." And so we've had issues with packing, supply, delays of packaging and things like that. So that's held us back, amongst other things. So
I'm sure you and Jess had lots to talk about on this front when you
absolutely.
were drinking together at the Bond. So okay.
Yeah. So looking forward to being able to actually sell something, and I'm definitely looking forward to getting into the new distillery. Again, when I came on board was when we were just starting to transition from the old stills over to building the new distillery, and the Heki was just opening the restaurant bar. Mm-hmm. So I've not had a chance to get hands-on yet and mash and make whiskey, and so I'm looking forward to actually getting behind the scenes and seeing how it's made and saying, nice. my hand did a little bit of that.
Well, it sounds like an incredibly exciting time. I know you've said, Mark, that you and your team have been working on this for over a decade under the radar. Like that radar is well and truly turned on and focused on you all right now. Like this seems like an incredibly exciting time.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, I think that with your babies, I mean, what you said before, it's while you're making this stuff, it's all potential, right? It's going to be great. It's going to be great. The minute you start giving it to people, everyone's got their opinions and their criticisms, and that's something that it's sometimes hard to take when you're a bit of I guess we've all got our own opinions on stuff, but I mean
what if they don't like your kids?
What if they don't like it? Exactly.
You don't like my kids?
What if they get a bad report card?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that some people aren't going to like it, and that's okay. It's time. It's time to pull the pin and let it go and let the kid, leave the nest. You can't be a helicopter parent forever, so you just got to let it go. And so that's what this year's about. This year coming is really just unleashing this torrent of stuff to the world and seeing what happens, and then learning from that and just making something that we're proud of and that hopefully you guys like.
Brilliant. Well, best of luck to you both and to the team and the new opening and the new facility and the special guest in March. Like we'll be tuned in. We'll be paying attention. And I'm sure listeners of the podcast will be following along as well. So best of luck to you, and thanks a million for today. This has been an incredible conversation, and I look forward to my drams when the time comes.
They're on their way.
They're on the way.
And thank you very much to both of you for listening to us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Chin chin.
Cheers.
Cheers.
As you've just heard, we did talk about living upside down on the other end of the sphere.
I love that
We all
joke.
call home.
That joke just carries along from the intro to the outro. If you're upside down, do you have to talk backwards as well? Do those things work like that? They don't.
It's not Twin Peaks. No, it's not.
Yeah, I am the arm.
You don't have to carry around a log. No,
Yeah,
it's
the whole
It's
thing.
all good.
Yeah.
What? I'm
Laura
curious.
Palmer I said hi, by the way.
She's dead.
Oh, shit.
Spoiler alert. Happens in the first 30 seconds of a show that was released 30 odd years ago.
It's one for the kids.
Listen, what was your takeaway from that chat?
There's so much to say. I love it when we talk to someone it could be someone at a distillery, it could be a writer, it could be an actor, it could be whomever, when they're talking from a place of passion.
I knew that was the word. Yep.
Right.
I agree with you. Yep.
To me that was striking, and you know, you can hear it in Mark, you could hear it in Colin's voice. Hearing about their distillation and their stills. Actually, they just posted recently on the Instas a picture of their stills where, you know, they've got their wash still that's just nice and smooth, and then their spirit still that's that faceted. It almost looks like a D20 for my D&D players out there. I really like it when people have a passion for whiskey and they decide to take whiskey in a direction that it hasn't been taken before. And it reminds me, in a way, of some of my favorite musicians. And my favorite musicians are those that did not take lessons. They taught themselves how to play guitar, drums, bass, keyboard, whatever. And it allows them to create music in a way that someone who's classically trained can't. It's just that different take because you're creating music through passion. And that's just the overall sense that I got. It's creating whiskey through passion, and they're tweaking things to go with the way they think about whiskey.
So I'm going to give you a yes and.
Oh my gosh, a little improv. There you go.
Because I agree with everything you said. That when I asked you the question, I figured it was going to get bounced back at me. That was going to be my answer as well, the passion.
Yeah.
The yes and is the fact that we got to speak about how does that passion manifest as a brand. And sometimes that's the tricky part of this. And I thought Mark did a nice job of speaking to that.
Yeah, sure.
Which was, we're excited by flavors. We're excited by different processes. We're excited by different casks. We are in a playground, and we love being in a playground. But we understand the consumer is looking for something from us on which they can hang their hat.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's the very real side to the business, where you have to say, pun of course intended, how do we distill down what we're doing in the playground to a consistent message in the marketplace? And I think that's perhaps where Colin enters into this.
Yeah.
And Colin is that bridge between what's happening at the distillery and what's happening in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And how do we consistently communicate ourselves to the marketplace? And yet, how do we still show passion? How do we still play with flavors and ingredients and tell interesting, unique stories? I thought that part of the conversation was really, really worthwhile and incredibly enjoyable.
Yeah. You know, and I feel bad. I almost said I feel bad in a way, but no, I do feel bad. I feel bad that you didn't have that tasting pack to taste along.
Thank you.
Because I really found their whiskeys to be unique, and especially there were 4 samples, one new make and 3 whiskeys. That new make was remarkable. I mentioned it in the interview. Their new make is one of the few new makes I've tasted that I can also taste in their whiskey while their whiskey doesn't taste new makey.
Yeah.
Right?
I know exactly what you're describing.
Springbank is the perfect comparison. When I taste Springbank's new make, I happen to be sipping on Springbank 15, by the way. When I taste their new make, it's clear that the distillery DNA is so strong it carries through decades in cask. And now, granted, Waiheke do not have decades of aged whiskey. It's clear that the whiskey that they do have, their new make spirit character is strong enough that it carries through, and it's so beautiful. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed following that flavor journey through the different cask types, through the different ABVs while we were with them.
Yeah, one more thing, and we can move along here. I thought it was quite telling that we've kicked off 2023 with Susanna Skyver-Barton talking, for one of the previews, and I said we would hold our feet to the fire here. We would remember this conversation. Mm-hmm. We will report back in January of 24. But one of the previews there was, how are people talking about the environment in 2023? Mm-hmm. And I think for those in New Zealand, the environment is a much more pressing issue. You live on an island, two islands, North Island, South Island. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I feel like it's a bit the same for our friends living in Japan, where you're on an island, those water levels rise, you really are in a bit of trouble. If weather gets more extreme, you really are in a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. So listening to the way Mark and Colin were talking about how they move materials around the globe, how they can use local materials, whether that's New Zealand peat or New Zealand wine casks, like the different projects they've got going on in-house to recycle through materials as well. Mm-hmm. The building of their own stills, right?
Yep.
And this kind of using math to lead what they wanted to achieve there. But the environment, right? The environment was part of that conversation. And it, one of the elements we talked about with Susanna, and we'll continue in 23, is we're not trying to politicize the environment in any way, shape, or form, right? We're looking at a very real issue that is non-negotiable, that is being described and discussed by people who are living at the front edges of this. I love that aspect. I love the fact that preview from Susanna has already paid dividends in 2023 for us.
Well, we do have a bit of news to share with people, and I'm really excited about what we do have to share. It's not a lot. I mean, it is a lot when it's just talking about things going on in our company, but we don't have a bucket's worth of news. We just have a couple things. So I'm gonna let the sleeping boy sleep because he's a crotchety little SOB.
That was our last chance to wake him up in season 6.
Oh man, is that true?
I think he'd prefer to sleep. Let's see him in season 7.
Oh, but now I kind of want to wake him up just because. I think he needs his comeuppance.
Then you better come upon him.
Extra, extra! Read all about it. Life story of Playboy Penny. Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it. Me and that Playboy in trouble again.
2 bits of news to share. News number 1, Jason, and this one is immediate, and it's immediate because what's happening now is happening now.
It's happening. There you go.
Right? So between January 25th and January 27th, noon Eastern to noon Eastern, Single Cask Nation, that's us, by the way, Jason.
Yes.
We are hosting what is called the Celebration of the Nation. And, man, you and I spent weeks trying to come up with an idea of sales incentives that would be beneficial not to us as a business who needs to sell whiskey to survive, but something that would be, interesting to, and I have to say it here, this is specific to our American customers or our customers who have an American address to ship whiskey to.
Very true.
We have a number of bottlings on our website, which is what we wanted. We always wanted whiskey to be selling in perpetuity, but at the same time, we need to make room in our warehouse for more whiskeys.
Absolutely.
So we have a bunch of bottlings that we're doing sales on, and we're not doing discounts, right? Anybody can do a discount. That's all well and good. We've decided to take this really cool approach where we say, okay, you spend $150 or more on our whiskeys, free shipping. You spend $200 to $249, you get free shipping plus a $20 gift card. Between $250 and $299, you get free shipping plus a set of glasses, right?
Are newly added to the website.
Newly added,
Glasses.
yeah, exactly. If you do between $300 and $349, it's free shipping, a $30 gift certificate, right? That's nice. And then if you do anywhere between $350 and $499, you get free shipping, a $30 gift certificate, plus a pair of glasses. And then finally, if you have an order that is $500 or more, you get free shipping on all of your bottles, you get a $50 gift certificate, and you get a free pair of glasses. And on top of that, this is the crazy thing. So please, if you're not a member of Single Cask Nation already, go to singlecasknation.com. You'll be on our email list. If you are a Single Cask Nation member and you're not in our private Facebook group, please go become a part of our Facebook group, because what you'll find is with each bottle on our website that we have for sale, every one you buy gives you the chance at a lottery to win a previously sold out or allocated bottling, including our wild turkey, right? Including some Oishi that we have in stock. Including some Thornton kosher for Passover rum, some Ben Nevis 6-year-old. And
some backwoods. Talking about down there.
Talking about a distillery who came to us from being listeners of the podcast, right? They're the OGs,
Community.
right? So there's a lot going on, and that's happening between today, January 25th, and Friday, January 27th, noon to noon, Eastern U.S. time. So did I miss anything, Jason?
You did.
Fuck yeah. What'd I miss? Oh, I know what I missed. You tell him.
Every single purchase goes into the hat to win a bottle of our 4th Woodcut series, a Thrusk. And that is gratis. That's not win the right to purchase. That is gratis. We will send you that bottle to enjoy.
That is a $395 bottle of 26-year-old Thrust that spent 5 years in an ex-Caroni cask. Pretty wild.
Here's my question.
Go ahead.
In listening to you describe all of this
right.
for our listeners, and I'm so happy that you woke up the paper boy. Happy.
Did it bring you to completion? Is that what you're about to tell me?
I think it was essential. To match the magnitude of this news. But my one question is, in listening to you, are we going to go bankrupt with all of this?
We are not going to go bankrupt, but there's no doubt about it. It was interesting. Someone had asked on our Facebook page, oh, are you also discounting? Listen, I appreciate the question. It is without a doubt a fair question, but think about some of these incentives: a $24 pair of glasses, a $50 gift certificate, $15 free shipping, right? All of that adds up. So are the whiskeys being discounted? Yes, they're being discounted, but it's not 10% off the bottle. It's the free shipping. It's the whatever. We're cutting it close, but that's what we're doing for the nation, right? We want to give them deals and say thank you, right? We're about to celebrate 12 years.
That is true. That is true.
Figure it's a nice way to
worth
say thank you.
celebrating.
Yeah.
100%. On behalf of the listeners, if we do go, not that I'm saying we will, if we do go bankrupt with this incredibly magnanimous set of offers, will we still have a podcast?
Yeah. Won't we? Was there an answer to that question you were expecting and I gave you the opposite? Oh, I see what you're saying. If you don't buy from us, we are ending this podcast. Is that what you're saying?
It's not, but that's a good angle. I like that. Let's hold the podcast hostage.
Oh, you want us to
We
survive?
don't come out of this alive. Nobody gets any more
That's it.
episodes.
That's it. Your 3-hour drive to work, done.
It's the anti-Oprah. You don't get a podcast, and you don't get a podcast, and you don't get a podcast. That'll show people. All right, that's exciting. I really am. Emphasis is on celebration of the nation, right? Here's some things in your pocket from us. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for buying. We love you. Hopefully you love us. Let's keep this thing going. This thing that we have that feels so special. Let's keep it going.
Beauty. And, it's year 12. Who knows what else we can be doing to celebrate the nation at a future date. So put that in the back of your minds, dear listeners. So what else? What was the other news that we had? Oh, retail release number 9. Do you want to talk about that one, Jason?
Yeah, this was the part I wasn't going to wake the paperboy for, but it's working its way out there. It's working its way to distributors. It should. Here's the thing. Here's what we always say, Joshua. Go to your favorite local store.
All right.
Ask them to bring in Single Cask Nation.
There you go.
Joshua, you have listed multiple times. You're welcome to list them again if you feel so inclined. You have listed multiple times what we have on offer in this 9th release. As a consumer, go and ask for it. Go and ask your store to bring in. Ask if they are bringing it in. Maybe they're a tremendous Single Cask Nation supporter.
Yeah.
Maybe you could introduce Single Cask Nation to them.
There you go. Yeah, I like that. It almost seems like the John Dewar approach. You know what I mean? Now, granted, Nation members aren't owners of Single Cask Nation, but they are Nation members, right? What did John Dewar do to get his whiskey into bars? He would go into a bar and say, "Do you have Dewar's blend?" And they'd say no, but because he kept asking, they would bring it in because they saw consumer demand. So I like
and they
that.
did not know he was the owner of that company.
So because you said I should maybe list them out, or I have done before, just as a very quick reminder,
For funsies.
we have a 34-year-old Invergordon from a refill sherry butt. We've got a 7-year-old Kalila, that's a marriage of 2 refill bourbon barrels. We've got an Inchgower 10-year-old, I think it's 10-year-old, right? Yeah, 10 years old. 1 refill bourbon barrel and one cask that was refill bourbon, but then we put it into a Spanish oak sherry cask. So another 2 cask marriage there. And then on top of that, we have our Darsa rum, Guatemalan rum, first fill bourbon barrel. And then finally, we have our Wolf Island Take 2, our third collaboration with the Water of Life film, but our second release in that retail Wolf Island bottling. So same distillery, same sort of makeup of casks, but almost treat it like a batch 1 and a batch 2 and check out what the differences are.
Well, and for funsies, this episode drops on January 25th. Burns's birthday, Robert Burns's birthday, I will have been at an event, a Water of Life film event at the British Embassy the night before this episode drops.
Amazing.
In Washington, D.C., I hasten to add.
Why did you hasten to add that?
Because I didn't clearly articulate where the embassy is located.
Oh my gosh. You know what's so funny? I know what the word haste means because I am a Lord of the Rings fan, and apparently you think I'm a hobbit. Like, I understand what
Not the only one who thinks it.
I know. Go easy. I know what, like, make haste means, but when you said I hasten to ask, it
You thought hate to add.
yeah, no, it almost had like a negative connotation to it. I'm like, oh, why doesn't he want to tell people? And I simply didn't hear the word properly. So there you go.
Didn't hear the word properly. That's going to be on your gravestone.
What's that?
Here lies Joshua Hatton. He didn't hear the word properly.
Come again? Listen.
Oh, wait till you leave your 40s behind in fewer than 11 months. I wish the listeners could see your face. Oh my gosh, it's like I just shit in the punch bowl in front of you.
50 years old is such a backhanded celebration. Because you're like, this is 50. This is huge, right? This is so momentous. It is so momentous. But it's like you're fucking 50. Oh, Jason.
Well, I tell you what, Joshua,
Yeah, go ahead.
to
Go ahead.
bring you out of the doldrums that I have put you in.
Thank you.
I know that you love reading special comments from
do.
our listeners and in some cases our viewers.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you regale us with some kind words, and I know that'll really perk you up. I'm going to pour a little bit more of this Springbank 12 cask strength that I enjoy.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to pour. So
Oops.
Listeners don't
I
know
might have
this.
missed my
Jason, you know this. I just finished my bottle of Springbank 15.
Do you have another heel?
I'm going to look
bring
for
to a
another
close?
heel. So
It really speaks to our collected shelves of whiskey that it literally took you 5 seconds.
Oh,
and
yeah.
all it was walking from your chair to the shelf. You're like, here it is. Here's the heel.
well, I've got my Springbank shelf. I've got my Imperial shelf. I've got my Glenmurray shelf.
Wah, wah, wah.
I've got my Wild Turkey shelf.
Wah, wah,
I've got my
wah.
Kilhoman shelf.
Wah, wah,
I've got my
wah.
Lagavulin shelf.
Okay, oh my God.
Oh, sorry, am I still talking? All right, so I'm pouring a Longrow 15. It is a distillery exclusive fresh Madeira cask, bottled in 2014. So I want to read some of the comments that came in regarding our Extra Extra It's All About Whiskey YouTube debut, but I'm just going to read a few of them because we actually have an email, maybe two, that I want to bring on, and I think that they may be good.
Maybe hold them for the mailbag episode, but remind
yeah.
me in front of our listeners that I've got a text message to read.
Okay, yeah. So that's good. So the emails, you people know who you are that emailed us recently. We're going to save those for the mailbag episode.
Awesome.
Again, a reminder to those listening: if you have questions for us, for Jess, for Elijah, please email us. You know how to get in touch with us. So, Extra Extra, It's All About Whiskey, Season 4, Episode 1. Yeah, there's some great ones. So you've got Jimmy Chen who says, new subscriber here to the YouTube, but not to SCN. I realize after all these years, I haven't had a clue what JH and JJY look like.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
Yeah.
Does he then go on to comment that he preferred it that way?
He doesn't say, but that's the takeaway here. I mean, especially when we're talking about you.
or you.
And there's another commenter, and actually this gentleman is always he makes a lot of comment on our YouTube, because we stream our podcast to YouTube, the audio version. And so a gentleman, his handle is just whiskey 5136. He just says, "Welcome to YouTube land." He's a localish guy. He's from Massachusetts. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. That's almost one of those careful what you wish for, boys. Right? He's like the old, the surly sea captain who sees you in the harbor bar. Like, welcome, boys. Haven't seen you here before.
I think you mean, "You're welcome, boys. Haven't seen you here before. Hearty tar. I think that's what you mean.
Are surly sea dogs the last group of people we can make fun of?
Listen, there has to be one group that we as a people can collectively make fun of, and I thought it would be surly sea dog pirates. Now, listeners, if there are any surly sea dog pirates within our listenerships, please reach out to us. Questions at One Nation Under Whiskey, info@singlecastnation.com. If you as a pirate feel targeted, feel threatened, feel triggered by us, donning the old pirate voice, then, please.
I feel like you, sir, have awoken a sleeping sea dog this day.
Oh, shit. There's gonna be a pirate in my house. There's a pirate.
All right. So
yeah. Okay. Sorry.
So with that said, what else?
So then we have Willem Killian. I think See, my computer screen is a little far from me, and I need a new prescription of my glasses because I'm getting old. And he says, and I should have read this one first, because what he's about to say is true. Guess I'm the first one who's made the switch over to listen to Extra Extra. So he was the first person to comment on the video.
Brilliant.
And this was great. So this was from Raphael Nardi, who says, "It's actually funny seeing the faces of the podcast I listen to most." What else do we have? Ari Cohen.
It is funny. Yeah. I did purposely try to roll my eyes less. I don't know if I succeeded, but I tried my best just to put a good face on it. I will say there will be more eye rolling in future episodes. You can bank on that. I will stop being on my best behavior now that the first one is in the books.
Oh, little good behavior first time around. Now you're in.
I was.
Yeah, there you go. Ari Cohen says, quote, "Put this over your throat," end quote. Quote of the show. Now, Jason, Willem Killian, who was the first one to comment, he did have some constructive criticism. And it was...
Well, I think we've heard enough.
It was about your audio and the fact that you failed us and forgot to select your really expensive microphone as the input to your volume when we recorded.
So here's the truth of the matter. Mm-hmm. I could hear myself perfectly.
Did you sound like shit, though?
No, I sounded amazing. Yeah. Absolutely amazing.
This is someone who huffs his own farts. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. It was perhaps a little embarrassing to know that the mic had not been activated that was in my face for the tight 35 that we continued with on the YouTubes. Yeah. You got to improve somewhere. After the second episode, there'll be nothing left to improve. There you go.
Yeah. We gotta. I'm just gonna cherry pick here.
I'm curious. Can I ask you a question?
No.
Did anybody comment on the subject matter?
Yes. So
okay.
So this was interesting. Thank you. So isn't that interesting? There was one person I think that commented on the subject matter. And let me find that. So the one person who commented was Tom Hankins. And he says, "This episode's further discussion of Jack Daniel's Bonded being ranked last year's #1 release by Whiskey Advocate was the perfect bookend to the topic of, quote, booze is 10% ethanol, 90% marketing from the article. And listen, that is such a hot take. And I really like what he said, but I think both you and I came away from that saying, this Jack Daniels is a really great drinker. Like, it was just a solid little drinker at $30. Is it the best whiskey on our list? Without a doubt, the answer is no.
No.
Is it something you could put in your glass almost any day? The answer is yes. Yeah.
Here's perhaps a takeaway. You wouldn't be embarrassed pouring it for someone who came to your house.
You would not. No, you would not.
Yeah, I thought more people might have a comment about dry January and where they stand on dry January. Because I'm really, if we've talked about community and we've talked about being on YouTube, and we've talked about, these real active comments that I'm really excited to hear more as the episodes go along.
Yep.
I'm trying to get a finger on the pulse of who does dry January. Just because I don't know anyone who does dry January doesn't mean millions of people are not doing dry January. There's also a chance that people who exist in our whiskey community are not doing dry January. If you watch a whiskey news podcast on YouTube, I don't know if we can use the word podcast anymore. I don't want to say vlog because that really sounds old man. If you're somebody who'd watch two jamokes discussing the latest whiskey news on YouTube, maybe you're not somebody who would participate in dry January either.
Yeah, to me, I think it's the vegetarian in a Brazilian steakhouse metaphor. You're going to be hard pressed to find a vegetarian in a Brazilian steakhouse. However,
they're on the plate, to be fair.
However, I will go out on a limb and say I'm one of those weirdos that does that because their salad bars are amazing. So we're going to be the people you're looking for who are whiskey lovers who enjoy a dry January are going to be just that, a vegetarian at a Brazilian steakhouse. Few and far between.
I'm so glad you keep including the word steakhouse because that sentence is going in one direction and then it pivots right back to steakhouse.
Well, like getting Brazilians?
You don't have to say everything out loud. You can have quiet thoughts in your head.
Like just waxing all your nether regions?
Not all.
Huh. Which nether region are you leaving out? Anyway.
Say something, anything else about anything else.
Listen, before we get out of here, I didn't forget about it. You clearly forgot about it. You mentioned that you got a text from someone, and I want to make sure that we call that out, and I want to hear the details of said text.
How dare you suggest I forgot about it? How dare you, sir?
Speaking truths.
How dare you?
Just speaking truths.
I may or may not have forgotten about it. Our very dear friend, Seabass.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Sebastian of blindbarrels.com was kind enough to text after listening to our last One Nation Under Whiskey with Susanna Skyver Barton, where we did a little Blind Barrels tasting at the end of this. And so I just wanted to include this paragraph for the listeners and to tie a bow on that previous tasting of ours. He knew he was getting into the podcast when he opened up with this.
Oh, he's going to compliment you, isn't he? He's going to say nice things about you. No?
It's a pun.
Oh, right. Okay.
yes.
I'll take that.
So he writes, a remarkable tasting with the Proof and Wood Polish whiskey. Really enjoyed it, and you guys were very positive about the experience for a whiskey that didn't quite hit your palate sweet spot. I'm really sorry about Joshua's leakage, which, for a man of your age, Joshua, you're going to be experiencing more of that.
Son of a bitch. Yep, go on.
I'm really sorry about Joshua's leakage. The benefit of doing those test boxes was that we found a couple flaws in our process that we've solved in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
Hopefully won't happen again. And I had written back to him and said, that pun is worthy of inclusion in the podcast. And then made sure that I had permission to read a private text. He then went on to say, in granting permission, absolutely, go ahead. My dad humour is terrible, but glad it falls on discerning ears. And he most certainly has a friend in us.
Oh, yeah.
He then went on to say, can't wait to check out Extra on the YouTubes. I made sure to reiterate something you and I had reiterated earlier, which was for those who were used to listening to the podcast, listening to Extra on their drive, you can still open YouTube on your phone. Just make sure you turn it away. You're not distracted while driving. And Seabass wrote to say that he had done that a fair number of times before. He says, new habits, but luckily this one will be easy to form, more motivation. How touching is that?
I love that.
How kind is that?
So it's interesting you mentioned that there was another person who tried to do the same thing, and for whatever reason, their iPhone sort of shut down. It closed and therefore turned off YouTube. But there's settings on your phone that you can just just make sure that it stays open. I don't know what those settings are, but that's how my phone is set up. I listen to stuff on YouTube in my car and I just put it face down and it's fine. So if anybody's having those issues, please just Google it, check out how to ensure that YouTube doesn't close on you.
Yeah,
And,
I've only ever had success with that.
Yeah.
And if I can figure out my new mic with the new platform.
Oh,
and I can
now
figure out how
who's
to
old
keep my
Jason?
phone open while watching the YouTubes. I mean, listening to it in my car.
Now who's an old man?
Hey, I see you've got some leakage to go clean up. You coughed a little too hard a moment ago.
Okay. Listen, there were far more comments, and we don't have to read them all. I think this is an okay place to have an incomplete list, but I really want to thank our viewers sincerely for commenting, and thanking our listeners who have become viewers.
Absolutely.
And if you've not gone ahead and watched our season 4 opener of Extra, it's all about whiskey on YouTube, please, again, go to YouTube. Single Cask Nation is the channel. Go ahead and subscribe to that channel. That's where you're going to find Extra. That's where we do a lot of our tasting videos for new releases. We're going to be planning some live events as well. Like, Jason, you really, it's a word you've mentioned. I probably need 2 hands to count for this episode. Community. We really want to...
Yes. Sorry, when you started talking about 2 hands, I wasn't sure where
it's
we
like
were
a
going
pepper
with that,
grinder.
Yes.
It's just like a pepper grinder. You said community over and over again, and it's something that we want to do. We want to connect more with our community. So expect some live YouTube things happening, whether it's extra or otherwise.
Exactly. Yeah. That's it. We've said all the words. Now it's time to start getting excited about being Seattle bound to see our Elijah up close and personal as he closes out his 20s. Swede Scott, Chris Hallstrom, Jess coming in from Scotland. I hope I'm not speaking out of school. Travis Williams is coming up
Williams
from
is going to be there. I'm excited to meet him.
Arizona. We have never, right? Our man, who was it in our YouTubes, who had said, I've never seen these 2 faces before. Well, I personally, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, Joshua. I have never met Travis face to face.
Do you know he's actually a pirate? I just realized that the whole time. I think we may have been offending him as part of the pirate community.
I know he skateboards.
Does he skateboard? No, Travis Williams does not skateboard.
He has mad skills. He has mad skills.
Is that what
you
the
heard it
kids
here first,
say?
Joshua?
Okay.
Sure. Mountain Dew, Doritos. That's also something the kids say.
No, they say Takis nowadays. Takis are the thing.
I fucking
Love Takis. They're so good.
They're so naughty.
Jason, can I really quickly?
Anyway.
No. Hold on, really
yes,
quickly.
Yes, really quickly. A Takis tasting. Let's do it.
I took you back to bar somewhat recently, right? When were you last at Bar Pizza? Bar New Haven.
It wasn't on the trip with Kai. So it would have been Mimi's.
Mimi's bat mitzvah. Oh, so then you will not have tasted this.
The Mexican pizza with the Takis?
Yes, you did taste it.
They didn't have any Takis the day I ordered it.
Oh. So
it's like an elote pizza.
Yeah, an
it's
elote pizza.
Fantastic.
Absolutely
Mexican street corn
phenomenal.
pizza. Fantastic.
And
no Takis.
And
on the day I was
this time now they add the Takis. That has become my favorite pizza.
No doubt.
Oh my gosh. So good.
Yeah. Imagine going there and ordering a mashed potato with no bacon and an elote with Takis. And a few beers and pool in the next room.
Heaven. I'm in heaven.
The only thing that would have me move to Connecticut.
I'm sorry, come again?
Until next time, Joshy.
All right, listen. Sincere thanks again to Colin of the Pluralized Mairs, of Mark Izzard, both of Waiheke Distillery in New Zealand, of down there, of the Upside Down.
Oh, caution.
You told me that people walk upside down there, Jason. Upside down there. Ooh,
But they're not evil. They're not evil.
upside down there. Jason, I've just nailed it. Upside down there. Anyway, sincere thanks to them. Sincere thanks to our listeners. Jason, as always, thank you to you.
And here's to our celebration of the nation and to us almost being 12 years old as a company.
So close to bar mitzvah age. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Well, here's to our celebration of the nation. I'm sure we'll come back and report on it if it's a. I'm sure we'll come back and report on it if it's a.
Is this sentence going to be a success, Jason?
Until next time, Joshua.